Welcome to Pop Americana. I'm your host, Ryan Ashley Wall, and tonight, talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, I have joining me Drew Tavares, who is looking particularly French,
We.
and not Byron Lafayette, but the lesser-known Nazgul, James Hamrick.
Don't have my garb today, like Byron, unfortunately. So
yes, Nazgul or terrorist, we'll never know. All right, as I said, tonight we're talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. We will be talking about it in two parts here for Pop Americana, but nonetheless, we will be spoiling the entire film and, of course, the Fellowship of the Ring before it. We're going to try not to spoil Return of the King, but I can't promise that. So you've been fairly warned. If you would, please like and subscribe and share, click the notification bell, and Lord of the Rings fans, it is your time to shine. The chance is now. You must tell us the one thing in the comments that every Lord of the Rings fan tells somebody they're introducing these films to. You know the moment. You know when it comes. Leave it in the comments. I won't even spoil it. Somebody will do it eventually.
The one thing to rule them all.
Yes. All right. Before we get into our experiences of the movie, I just wanted to set the stage for the context this movie came out in, and I have prepared a clip just for that. Take a look. How do you follow up on success? With The Fellowship of the Ring winning over $897 million at the box office and storming the Academy Awards with 13 nominations and 4 wins, The Lord of the Rings was a cinematic and cultural hit overnight. While Peter Jackson filmed all 3 Lord of the Rings films back to back, the pressure was on for the sequel to deliver. A whole new generation of fans had already read the books by the time The Two Towers was heading to theaters in December of 2002. Sequels often bear the crushing weight of hype, and expectations run amok. Lightning was caught firmly in the bottle and the lid on tight. And lightning never strikes the same place twice. Time would prove that The Two Towers could not only stand the crushing pressure, but would do so with such grace and finesse that The Return of the King would have to pull off a cinematic miracle to satisfy. Well, all of us have seen this film, clearly. And unlike with Byron in the mix, all of us saw this film a long time ago. So, James, you're new here. Why don't you tell us what your first experience of this film was like?
Sure. So my oldest sister knew the movies were coming out and decided to just read through all the books, got herself super excited, got me really excited. And so she saw The Fellowship of the Ring. I was too young to see it in the theater, but whenever it came out to buy, it obviously came home with her, and I watched it religiously for a year. I watched it over and over and over. It became like, it defined my life in a way that I don't even mean, like, it's not exaggerating. And so I talked my parents into letting me see The Two Towers in the theater. And so this was an early theatrical experience for me, and it blew me away. Like, I could have a whole story about how, like, basically the trajectory of my life was like set by these films. And this was a very big piece of this long sequence of moments, was seeing Lord of the Rings for the first time in the theater. And I would have been like 7 at the time. So it was just the greatest spectacle I ever saw on a big screen.
I mentioned with Fellowship of the Ring, I saw it on a whim. Saw Fellowship of the Ring on a whim in Florida when I was visiting my grandmother for Christmas, and my cousin took me. And by the time The Two Towers hit theaters, I had read the books and was just ready to experience this next chapter in the saga. So the point is, I begged to see this in theaters as well. And this was one of the early experiences of a film franchise that I was a big fan of, that I saw absolutely every entry in theaters. So I the Two Towers was no exception. My birthday is in December. I requested for my birthday to go see this movie. I didn't request anything else. Just take me to see this film. And that was a good birthday. Yeah, the Two Towers, man. Like it's a breathtaking experience, and made all the better in the theater. So these films are always getting reshown. So if you get a chance, you owe it to yourself to see these in theaters. It's an experience you'll never forget.
Yeah, I don't really remember like what it was like when I first saw it in theaters. I was like really, really young, still in the womb actually. But but yeah, no, I don't really remember it like super well. But like James, definitely like this whole trilogy, especially this film, like kind of like changed who I was and was like a huge part of my childhood. I rewatched these films all the freaking time whenever we got them on DVD and stuff. So yeah, but I love this film so much. And earlier today I was rewatching it to kind of like catch up and everything. And I hadn't seen the extended cut since I was like 8 or something like that. So it was nice seeing all those like extra scenes because I didn't remember like half of them. And I was like, wow, like there's a lot of like really solid extra content that's in the extended cut.
Yeah, you can argue with The Hobbit which ones can have an extended and which ones can't. But I think with Lord of the Rings, like for me, extended is the only way I view it anymore.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I saw it theatrically. I think I have a memory. I don't know if this is the last time, and I didn't finish it. It was on TV, and I was like, oh, I'm going to support this. I'm going to give them a little viewer number.
Yeah.
They'll know that somebody's watching. But like, and I don't remember which of the three it was, but like a scene that was coming up and the movie just comes and goes and that moment never happens. And I'm like, this feels sacrilegious. This feels wrong. I can't.
There's one in this movie that it'll probably be discussed in the second half, but there's one in this movie that it boggles the mind that it was not in theatrical version.
Eowyn stew, we already know.
but quite apart from that, I forgot to mention fun little tidbit here. The Two Towers Extended Edition is the last VHS I ever got.
The Return of the King is mine.
It's like we think about 2 disc sets, but they were just 2 cassette like case. Yeah, the Two Towers Extended Edition was the last VHS I ever got. That was a funny little bit here. All right, well, look, we've got a lot of movie to cover here. It's a long, glorious film, and we don't want to rob anyone of our analysis of any moment. So let's get right into it. Look, it opens with a prologue, just like Fellowship of the Ring, except also nothing like Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah. The prologue here is not exposition, it's action.
I mean, okay, so whenever I think back about the first time I saw this as this little bitty kid in this theater seat looking at this huge screen, just whenever we like, I was like, okay, we're here for the next part, whenever we push into the mountain and we see that, I'm like, whoa, what's this? I was like, this is interesting, this is weird. Whenever the camera dives in after him, I didn't know. I was like, oh, what? And seeing that whole thing play out in front of me, I was like, this is like I said, it was a year of my life. Like the Fellowship of the Ring literally consumed a year of my life. I probably watched it once a week, and I don't even think I'm exaggerating. And so I was almost worried, like, how does this top? Like, how can this live up to what I want it to be? And just everything going on, grabbing the horn. I'm just like, I was blown away that a movie could start off like so spectacularly. I was like, this is awesome.
It's in media res, which is not how Fellowship started at all. And so it is a bit of a stark contrast, but also like the image from the intro to this movie that is burned into my brain, like that is just the money shot to me, is that wide shot of the lake, and you see the dot of the Balrog and Gandalf falling, and it's just like,
The
oh,
choir in the background.
yes, it's just chef's kiss, beautiful perfection. That is like, if you want to know how to do a wide shot, that is how you do a wide shot, showing scale, epicness, majesty, wonder. That is cinema with a capital C and a trademark. Like, beautiful.
Scorsese approved, all right?
Yes. What you got for this one, Drew? If we haven't sucked all the air out of this conversation.
Yeah. I don't really have much to add, but like when I was rewatching it, like the establishing shot of the mountains is just, it's so good. Like it just makes the world feel like so alive, and just freaking love it.
It is an interesting beginning because it's a very like, before you know, like on rewatch now, like it's easy to forget, but like before you know, we're getting all these shots and we're hearing the lines from the previous one with very like calm music and just like gentle flying over the clouds. You're like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And so when that push through the mountain happens, you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, we're gonna come back to this repeatedly, but Howard Shore is just killing us with this music, man. It's so good. It's so good the whole time. But yeah, that's what a way to open a film, you know, and to snap, like, again, like you said, James, but for a different reason. On rewatch, you see this as, oh, this is what happened to Gandalf afterwards. And if you're watching the first time and you haven't read the books, you might be thinking, oh, well, this was all a dream, a really, really cool dream. And because it's Frodo having the dream, you get the idea that maybe this is how Frodo wished things had gone. You know, like he couldn't.
I wish Gandalf just freaking wrecked shop on that Balrog.
Yes, exactly. Like he's thinking, you know, Gandalf's too awesome to die this way. This is how I feel about it. You know, like subconsciously, because it's a dream. You know, it's not like he's telling Sam what he thinks happened. You know, but then we're snapped into a reality where Frodo and Sam are alone, and they don't have that awesome, powerful wizard with them, and we're introduced to Emyn Muil. Well, not really introduced, reintroduced and properly established with Emyn Muil, which is, as Gimli says, an impassable labyrinth of razor sharp rocks.
So after that, it gets even better.
Yeah. There's a fun moment with that line where years ago on a forum, somebody had a Lord of the Rings quote challenge where you go through an entire day of school using nothing but Lord of the Rings quotes, and everybody was adding these like ridiculous contexts, like if you're hall monitor you can say you shall not pass or whatever. And my favorite one is like when there's an obstacle course in gym class and he does the whole Gimli spiel. I was like, what? That's so dumb but so good. But Gimli's assessment of the area is apt. It's a very impassable labyrinth of razor sharp rocks. And if you're watching the theatrical version, it kind of goes by pretty quick. But we linger in the lostness a bit in the extended edition. Yeah, especially like the bit with the rope, which it's one of those through lines where sometimes something gets cut in one version and it just gets cut in subsequent films, and the rope is one such example, where the theatrical just doesn't deal with the rope at all, and then this one, both the extended of Fellowship and the Two Towers have the thread of the rope. So yes, I made a thread pun with the rope. Deal with it.
I do think that like there's a few things that I would want to say about Emyn Muil, because I think I think it's insanely well directed, and I think even child me picked up on something that I like couldn't really articulate at the time. And it was like this of one of the first times that a film really did this for me, which was like I'm going in, after the high of Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm like, I'm ready for this. And then it gives us this spectacular opening, and then we walk around for a little bit, and it's just like we're talking about going in circles, and the atmosphere there is so oppressive, and like just the constant fog sure is finding the most depressing notes to just hold on to. They just feel like complaining about the lembas bread storm approaching, like it is such a dour feeling. And I remember as a kid really being struck by that, like being struck by like how slow it was, but not in a like, oh, I came here for action, I want to see this, but realizing that like in a very weird way, I feel like I'm in Emyn Muil. Like I feel weirdly connected just because of like the direction and the tone and the atmosphere. I started to like take on the mood of them. I'm like, oh my gosh, where are we going? What is going on? And like, again, not in I'm complaining that the movie is slow, but like I'm feeling weirdly participatory here. Like I feel like we are like just freaking sick of this place and ready to get out, but in a way that I as a viewer should feel. So yeah, I just think it's like, and even more so in the extended edition, it's just a really cool, patient part of the movie where it's like, man, this kind of sucks, and we need to spend time on why it sucks, because Gimli was right. Like we talked this up in the last movie about like, hey, we don't really want to go there. Like it's not great. And so when we get there and we're like, dang, the last movie was right. This is a rough place.
With the way that the Fellowship of the Ring ended, with like just the massive amount of action and stuff, and then the way that Two Towers opens up with the action with Gandalf and Balrog, like they kind of like needed that like calm before the storm, especially with what happens later on in the film, and like how intense and bleak it kind of gets, and like I feel like the just how I guess like gross everything just like looks with like the fog and all of that. That's almost like a way of like foreshadowing what's to come in the rest of the film, because like yeah, just there's so many locations that they go to and things that they deal with that's just absolutely bleak, which is like almost the opposite of what Fellowship of the Ring was. I mean, there were times where Fellowship was dark, but like Two Towers, they go all in.
You're right. It's a great tone setter for sure.
Yeah. I think also too, it sets up the problem really well. So far, we've started with reminding us of Gandalf and losing Gandalf. All right. And of course, this picks up right after the breaking of the Fellowship. So Frodo has just left any knowledgeable guide he had, and he lost the most knowledgeable guide he had previously. And now Frodo and Sam are just lost, just totally aimlessly wandering. They know vaguely what they have to do, vaguely where they need to go, but they're not getting it done. And it sets up the problem of where do we go now that we no longer have a guide? And it sets up the need for a very unlikely, very unusual guide, who I am sure we will spend quite a bit talking about, if not for technical reasons or dramatic reasons, or just Gollum. Yeah. So first off, the establishing shots of Gollum in this film like are chilling. Like the moon up on the cliff and him like scrambling down on
Iconic.
It's
so good.
And muttering to himself, of course, they stole it from us. You know,
Yeah.
that stuff is just, again, we've already been hit with cinema with a capital C, and we're just going to be getting many, many, many of these moments going forward. But we're talking about a film that came out in 2002, with a motion capture CGI character that holds up today. Like,
So good.
there are shots, where I mean, obviously, Gollum is a CGI creature. It's not so flawless that you can't tell whatsoever, but it is so flawless that not for a moment are you taken out of the film.
Yeah.
And that's the best CGI motion capture character can do. And Andy Serkis not only pioneered it here, I mean, there were other smaller variations of this before, but utterly pioneered it here and perfected it here, and then continued to improve upon perfection throughout his career. So, like, not enough praise can be showered at Andy Serkis for this performance and for motion capture CGI characters that we have today. Like, I can't say enough praise for Andy Serkis for that. And even if it wasn't motion capture, just the performance alone is phenomenal. So anything else to add about Sméagol specifically?
So I remember the first time I saw it, I had a moment of panic because I didn't watch like a lot of horror movies. I didn't watch a lot of things that freaked me out.
That's funny
And
knowing you now.
right. Yeah, that wave came in the teenage years, and then I became obsessed. But like I guess I just kind of got over the goblins and over the Uruk-Hai and stuff. Like I just got used to them because I rewatched it that year. But the shot of him coming down, I was like, oh dude, this guy is kind of scary looking. Like he freaked me out. And the scene where it's that same scene whenever he's trying to get the ring, and it's that close-up of him doing this and like really exhaling as he's trying to get at the ring.
Yeah.
That shot terrified me. And I remember specifically having this thought of like, this is a 3 hour, I'm gonna have to deal with 3 hours of this guy. And I was almost scared. I'm like, I don't want to look at this guy for 3 hours because he was genuinely scaring like little kid me. And I mean, what a compliment that is to the character. Is like, this guy showed up and I'm like, I am terrified. This isn't a little computer generated thing. This guy is like freaking me out. He looks so real, and his like the performance and everything is so good. I remember like almost being confused because I'm so scared by him. And then there's the like him crying, and I'm like, what is this thing? Like he's in such a fast moment, he stopped being intimidating, and now he's it's pathetic. It's so good.
Yeah, I definitely am there with you. Like Gollum definitely like freaked me out as a kid. Not as much as my sister though. My sister like could not watch the movies because she had nightmares from them all the time. But yeah, like, oh man, like it's crazy to think that like Lord of the Rings basically like pioneered like all this motion capture stuff, and how in like not only in film but also in like video games, like motion capture, like especially video games, motion capture is used super heavily. And without the Lord of the Rings, like it probably wouldn't be the same today. Like
Trying to rob Jar Jar of his glory.
Yeah.
Yes, I am actually. Sméagol's better. Sorry, Jar Jar. But yeah,
I'm gonna sidestep that.
But yeah, like no, and like just like from what we like had little knowledge of like about Gollum in the Fellowship of the Ring, it was just like it's such a big moment to like finally see like the character, because you know they teased him a little bit in the Fellowship of the Ring. Gandalf kind of like described him a little bit, and like to actually like see him fully realized, especially in the way that he was with like Andy Serkis, just absolutely like transforming into this role. Like you wouldn't even be able to tell that it's him, because it's just so unique and stands out from a lot of other performances. So yeah, like I love the introduction to Gollum, and like just it's like he's so freaking terrifying. Like you said, the scene where he's like crawling down the rock is just iconic. And I'm not talking about The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, by the way.
Someone photoshopped that where he's just like going down his abs.
You can get traction on those abs. You can really.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just.
It's about drive. It's about the ring of power. We
Look at that.
Oh man.
Wow. But that ring doesn't have a rock on it, so.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, James alluded to the confrontation that Frodo and Sam were just pretending to be asleep and got the jump on Gollum, and that barely helped. Like, Gollum proved to be surprisingly formidable, and it's not until Frodo actually is able to draw Sting that their confrontation ends, which otherwise would have ended with Sam being choked out.
So another iconic shot, the like Frodo looking down at him with Sting at his throat.
Yeah,
like I love that.
Yeah, and then like you said, there's that transition where we go from him being the menacing threat, the having all the power in the situation, to shrieking in pain and terror, and like Frodo's line of "Now that I see him, I do pity him," hearkening back to that very, very important conversation in Fellowship of the Ring, which also, when we were talking about visual effects of Gollum, one thing that's done repeatedly but never more pronounced than in that Fellowship of the Ring moment is that like gloss over his eyes that's like cat-like.
Oh yeah,
that's a cool effect. I love that. But
yeah.
But yeah, that they tame Sméagol, so to speak, with the elven rope, and that bit of bargaining where he begs them to take the rope off. And at the time, I'm very much team Sam. Let's tie him up and leave him. It's not until I'm older that I realize how actually important all that thematic material about Gollum really is, because as much as and I far be it from me to bash Sam, that is not my intent, but as much as we are going to from here on out be just heaping praise on Sam, he is ultimately, I won't say wrong about Gollum, but his perspective is only one half of the way we should view him. And that other half is incredibly important. And in a way, Frodo and Sam's treatment of Gollum and perception of Gollum is bifurcated in the same way that Gollum himself is.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is very important to his character going forward.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead. I'm rambling. So
I was just saying, like, the themes of these films is just so profound. Like, just it's so beautiful and so, like it's very kind. Where you think, I know you said not want to dip too far into spoilers into Return of the King, so I don't know, maybe skip 20 seconds. But like knowing what ultimately, you have Sam saying all of these things throughout Two Towers, and then knowing what happens in Return of the King, someone could be like, oh, okay, so Sam, like, so this didn't really work out, and Tolkien would be like, yeah, it didn't really, in a lot of ways, it didn't work out. Sam was onto him and what was going on, and so the person would be like, okay, so yeah, so Sam was right at the beginning. They should have done that, and Tolkien would be like, no, they were right. Frodo was right for humanizing Sméagol. That was despite what happened. That's the powerful thing, is despite what Sméagol does, Frodo seeing
Frodo.
Frodo seeing Sméagol as a tragic, broken character with no love and nothing, like there's just deprived of any sort of affection and interaction and burdened by such a powerful weight and obsession for Tolkien to be like, no, he still needed, Frodo was right to do this. Frodo was right to show this guy kindness despite what happens. I'm like, that is awesome. What an incredible story.
Yeah, so from one set of hobbits to another, we have another thread of the story with Merry and Pippin being last we saw them in the captivity of the Uruk-Hai and still in the captivity of the Uruk-Hai, which great little side characters. I love the Uruk-Hai. I'll go on record saying it. I love them. Mm-hmm. Every line of dialogue is completely iconic. So
there's some really great lines, like a little bit later on in the film too, from the Uruk-Hai.
Yeah. And they have the whole Merry has that like big scratch on his head and pretends to be incredibly sick to try and get something to drink. Mm-hmm. And they give him God knows what.
Grog.
Yeah, that's a neat little reintroduction to Merry and Pippin.
All right, so this scene with like the Uruk-Hai, like I mentioned in our last episode, the Uruk-Hai are some of my favorite like adversaries, I guess, in the trilogy. Like that, they're just like so much more cool and interesting than the orcs and like the goblins, in my opinion. And you know, we just see them like running away from Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli. And you know, like Merry and Pippin, they're still in captive and all that, and they're trying to like figure out a way that they can leave like something on the trail so that like the group can find them. And the I can't remember what it is, the little like pin that's on their capes,
the brooch.
Yeah. They end up like biting that off like without the Uruk-Hai seeing it. And they leave it like behind so that Aragorn can find it. And just something that I really love about that scene is the like the super close up shot of the footsteps, and you just see the Uruk-Hai's foot just absolutely like stomp on that thing, and like I don't know what it is about it, but
it's a weirdly memorable shot.
It's super memorable, and like it's absolutely disgusting because the mud just looks vile, and like his foot was just like, I ain't about that, fan, but it is such a it's such an iconic shot for some reason. I swear I'm not like Tarantino. All right.
Yeah, this again. That's the magic of these movies. Every single scene has something that, in my mind, is iconic. I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. We all agree that this thing is like the greatest thing ever, right? And
the answer is
it begins. I mean, obviously the seeds are planted in Fellowship, but to me, it really begins in the Two Towers, and then, if I'm able to come back for Return of the King, talk about even more. That like I think Merry and Pippin, in my mind, are the absolute gold standard for like side characters. I seriously don't think that there's like that they have anyone else that they're second to, because you know they Fellowship of the Ring, I think it's reductive, but you could like just for simplicity's sake you could say okay, they're the comedic relief, you know. I mean, they have their great moments, but they're there for a little bit of levity.
And they killed Gandalf. Sorry.
That's neither here nor there. But like they genuinely become phenomenal characters here with their own plot, like their own character arcs, their own motivations, their difference in their personality comes out way more here in a way that's beyond just, oh, this one's a little smarter and this one's kind of goofy. Now it's like, no, you see what drives Merry, and you see the thing like the way that fear with like constrains Pippin, and like the way it's so strong. And so you get a feel for that in this opening scene of like Pippin being immediately scared for Merry, and Merry being like, no, it's just an act, you know, like don't worry about me. I love it. And then I will definitely share y'all sentiments about the Uruk-Hai just being freaking awesome. There's multiple lines during this scene that I quote regularly. Like
Yeah, same.
when people are asking about something, it's like, oh, I'll change the first part, and I'm like, oh, do you know what I'm talking about here? And I'm like, no, and then I'll just follow like, well, then keep your mouth shut. it's, it's
They're
so good.
quotable.
Give him some medicine, boy. Like it's
Yes.
just like it's so awesome. And then okay, speaking of scenes that you're like, how is this cut? The theatrical edition has some pretty jarring editing actually right here, because the Uruk-Hai are running, and then we have their little moment with Merry and Pippin, and then you have the guy like, what do you smell, man flesh? And then we cut to orcs standing there who are not there before. Like they cut out all of the dialogue between the Uruk-Hai and the orcs of Isengard there.
Yeah.
And it's like this, we literally just cut to a primary shot of a character who is apparently here the whole time. And so like that scene flows so much better in the theatrical cut. That's another reason why I can't go back to, or in the extended cut. That's why I can't go back to theatrical.
Yeah, because there's that second group of orcs who are not Uruk-Hai who are joining in, and yeah, you do get that establishment of that.
And it sets the stage for the infighting that happens later and outside of Fangorn.
Yeah, and I'll add this because we do need to move on to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, but I've always viewed Merry as the second most mature hobbit of the group. Like you have Frodo, and Merry may be a goofball, but he is the second most mature. Like even in Fellowship of the Ring, you see him and they join Merry and Pippin, and he says, "What was that?" And then he takes charge. He's the one that says, "Buckleberry Fairy, follow me." And
he knows what Frodo's doing before he leaves. He's leaving.
Right. Yeah. So Merry is definitely like leader of the Hobbit B squad. You know what I mean? There is a sort of parallel Frodo-Sam relationship. It's not the same because obviously Frodo and Sam are more master servant, and Merry and Pippin are more chummy and more peer-like. But like obviously Merry is the brains of this operation, so to speak. And we'll see that coming back, of course. Yeah, speaking of awkward, jarring cuts, we're gonna not in the film, but in this analysis of the film, we're gonna jump over to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli pursuing Merry and Pippin by listening to the ground. Like, okay, that's one of those things that like it's not a thing. Viggo Mortensen
it is a thing. He's a Dunedain. he can do it.
Yeah, Viggo Mortensen made it a thing. Like, I don't care. It's silly and awesome.
And the thing is, it's the exact opposite of a jarring cut, because cutting from the stomp brooch to him on the ground, hearing the stomp, like that is, mwah.
Yes. That's why I said not in the movie, just right. In our analysis of it. Yeah, that is a really good cut. We are reintroduced, and that's another thing we don't often talk about is in this we're getting reintroduced to the Fellowship, and they do it so economically here with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, with Aragorn being the serious tracker, Legolas being the eyes of the operation, but also like subservient in a way to Aragorn, like not in the Frodo Sam kind of way, but he kind of cedes leadership to Aragorn, and then Gimli comes in strong as the comic relief.
Yeah.
And they set that like, yes, exactly. They set it up back to back to back by having Aragorn listen, and then you have the Legolas, "Come, Gimli, we're gaining on them," and Gimli tumbling down the hill, and like that is a really economical way to go. Remember these guys? Yeah. Because this scene just amounts to 3 guys running, and it's still cool.
Oh yeah, and like especially the score when they're running is just so good.
Yeah. So in my mind, like whenever I hear the words like Lord of the Rings, and you just like the first, like whatever the first image that's gonna pop in your mind, for me, it's the helicopter shots of them running across the plains of Rohan. Like the cut from him, like over the very dangerous over shoulders, and then we cut to the dun dun dun. I'm like, that moment is like,
good.
this is, it doesn't have to be this awesome, but it is.
Yeah.
And so like that's kind of like just the immediate like image that flashes into my head of like, what is Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings is these three guys running across mountains with Howard Shore behind them. Like, this is what it's all about, man. It's awesome.
Just imagining like a bunch of people carrying Howard Shore while he's conducting with a running orchestra, like just
The
off
piano on
camera.
fire meme.
It's like Mad Max Fury Road, where like it's like a guitar with the flamethrower on it. He's just like conducting and like flames are coming out.
Except it's like cave trolls pushing a big cart,
Yes. Another cave troll. They have a cave troll.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah, my goodness, helicopter shots is, I mean, we talked about them last time. We're going to be talking about them for the remainder of this series because they just took advantage of New Zealand to a degree that is incredible. Like, it single-handedly took New Zealand from being a country that's like, oh, little Australia, to no, this is a tourist destination right here. Like,
this is your new favorite country.
Yes. Exactly. So I mean, I'm sorry, New Zealanders, if you're watching, but yeah, Lord of the Rings made you happen. I mean, obviously New Zealand's incredible scenery did it, but it was popularized and made known through Lord of the Rings, and it should be known for Lord of the Rings because it's breathtaking. And I know Amazon shot there as well, and I'm hoping that pans out too. But you can't beat New Zealand for these locations that are, in this film, and well, I say film, but it's 3 films. It uses a combination of sets, locations, and a little green screen, of course. But to me, the sets and locations are just breathtaking every time. And this scene with, again, it just amounts to 3 guys running. Gosh,
it's the greatest thing your eyes have ever seen.
Yes, it's just 3 guys running, and you're like, oh, this is awesome. We have talked about that, but if we're adding one to the meme counter, we have the granddaddy of all memes.
Yes, sir.
I can't hear this line without hearing the rest of the song play out to me, but they're taking the hobbits to Isengard.
God.
It's got a rhythm to it, and like, you wouldn't know that on its own, but after you've heard it, it's just you dun, 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 dun.
So good. So I'm all about like immersion. I'm like, I don't break me out of it. Don't remind me I'm in a movie. And so every time this happens, I've got to try to suppress that in my head. Like, don't think of kazoos. Don't think of kazoos.
Yep, it's 3 lines that do it for me. It's they're taking the hobbits to Isengard. Tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with him. And what did you say?
Yes.
Those are the 3. Like, there's other lines in the song, but for some reason those 3 automatically trigger it to me. It's like, oh no.
I've always heard a Balrog of Morgoth as a call and response. A Balrog. Every time he says it, I want to respond with,
what did you say?
Yeah, same.
What a beautiful time.
I know. And that's how this fandom is, really. Like, we just have fun. There are toxic elements to many fandoms, but Lord of the Rings is one of the most pleasant, for sure. For sure.
Up until recently.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, enough of 3 guys running. Instead, we have your typical 1990s 3D puzzle wizard coming into the picture with Christopher Lee's Saruman, giving us one of a shocking number of monologues in this film. But one of the cool ones that sets up the conflict that is going to carry this film between the forces of Isengard and Rohan in particular.
And the union of the two towers.
Which is just, good line. Christopher Lee, man, he just, I said this in Fellowship. I said, I'm going to say this in The Two Towers. Probably won't say it in Return of the King because not much there, but
we'll find a way.
We talk about Ian McKellen being, just definitive Gandalf. But the other side of the coin is Christopher Lee is definitive Saruman. Like, this is as good as it gets. I can't name anyone else who I would rather do it. I can't name anyone else I think could come even in the same caliber. And man, this is really Saruman's movie in a way. Like, he gets a big chance to shine here with a lot of scenes. We get a lot. In Fellowship of the Ring, we got a little bit of cutting back to Saruman, but it was very much just reminding us that an enemy was out there pursuing us, and very little of Saruman as a player in this. And in this film, we have Saruman as an incredible threat.
The player.
Such that you really have to understand Sauron as an existential threat to even compare. Because Saruman has presence that Sauron simply doesn't. And luckily that doesn't hurt Return of the King, because Return of the King is excellent and perfect and wonderful. You would think it would by how different they treat their main antagonist, though. Because Christopher Lee's Saruman is just, every scene he's in, like, again, instantly, constantly, iconically quotable the whole time. And man,
yeah, there's a bit in the special features in the Two Towers Extended Edition where Christopher Lee is talking about a conversation he had with a friend after the friend saw the Two Towers. I think there was like this idea that Saruman was going to have like the most screen time of anybody. Like, it was going to be like Christopher Lee was saying, like, in a big way, it's Saruman's movie and blah, blah, blah. And his friend came up to him and he's like, you weren't in it as much as I thought you were going to be. And I always think of this now whenever I think of Two Towers. It's what Christopher Lee said is perhaps not, but Saruman looms over every scene in this movie. Whether I'm in it or not, Saruman is in the movie. Like, Two Towers has such a strong, deeply felt sense of desperation and hopelessness, and all of that is being driven by the White Hand. All of it is coming from Saruman. People are leaving their villages because of Saruman. Everything that happens in this movie, I guess, outside of like Frodo and Sam, is when you go back to the previous causes, the source of everything is all of Saruman's machinations. And it's just, every time we cut back to him, he's just, the presence that you feel, the threat that you feel is like, oh gosh. I mean, you're right. Nobody could have done it like this. It is one of the all-time perfect roles ever.
Is this the scene where there's like the really weird like human that's meeting up with Saruman?
Yeah, that cuts his hand with the dagger.
Yeah, that cuts his hand. Yeah. Was that in the theatrical cut, or is that an extended cut scene?
That's extended.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought, because I was like, I do not remember this at all. I feel like I would have remembered it, because I was like, dang, like if I saw that as a kid, it probably would have scarred me.
Like it scarred him.
There's another scene, and we'll get to it eventually, that I was just gonna briefly say, but like there's one scene where actually my mom would like tell us to like look away, and it's when they're in the bog and Frodo falls into like the swampy water, and the like ghostly faces like pop up. And like when I watched that this morning, I was like, dude, or like last night, I was like, dude, that is freaking nightmare feel.
Yeah, we'll definitely be lingering on that incredible moment. But James, there was something I think you wanted to say about Saruman stirring up the men in Rohan.
Yeah. So the first one is just, I mean, it's a stupid aside, but I can't watch this without thinking this. Whenever the first time we watched whenever we watched it at home for the first time, these the extended edition, everything, and he's in there and he says, "We will die," and it's like zooming in on his face, like, "For Saruman." My sister just went, "And a dental plan," because like his face or his teeth are horrible. And now every single time I insert that stupid joke in my head. The more serious thing is that I think part of what makes these moments so strong is it's incredible world building, where like it's working. It's the opposite end of what the Two Towers is and how it's opening up the world of Middle Earth, because Fellowship of the Ring is way more fantastical. Like we're dealing almost exclusively with elves and with dwarves and with hobbits and a wizard, and like we've got
Nazgul,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've got two humans, in the whole thing. And the Two Towers is this incredible continuation of this world building where like now it's all about the world of men. It's all like we're entering the world of men, and a lot of that is done through Rohan and everything over there. But a lot of that is done in this scene as well, where it's like you've up until this point you've imagined this whole conflict as it's obviously all the good guys, all the elves, all the humans, all the dwarves versus like orcs, and that's it. But this scene shows it like there's a lot of people who are buying into what Saruman has to say. They're he's masterfully playing off of local politics in Rohan, of like, these are the people who've taken your land. These are like, and he's able to like influence this other side of the world of men. And now, before you know it, like now that we've left this purely and entirely fantastical setting and we're entering in the world of men, now all of a sudden men, in addition to men being like the source of some help, men are also now a source of antagonism. And so to me, that moment of showing that like, hey, it's not all just orcs and Uruk-Hai and goblins and stuff. Like this world is alive and breathing and has its own politics outside of the Fellowship and their mission. And to see Saruman manipulating that, I think is really, really well done.
Again, in another buttery smooth transition, we have the Rohan, my lord, is ready to fall, and then instantly folding into learning about Rohan, and again further complicated this relationship with men, where there are some good men and there are some not so good men, and even within the factions of good men. So that's one thing that like there's a common critique of Lord of the Rings, that like everything's black and white, all the bad guys are obvious, and like it falls flat to me if you take into consideration the whole legendarium, or even just the Two Towers. And in fact, like a lot of Hubaloo is made of Faramir's comments later regarding the Haradrim guy, but that is a continuation of this theme of corrupt men that we're seeing, and not the establishment of it. Like that's the first time we comment on it, but it's established as far back as Isildur, carried on through Boromir, and then we go into more and more sinister, because those are instances of good guys being corrupted, not wholly to evil, but to a very bad place. And now we have men who are actively serving the evil powers here, especially in Rohan, where we are introduced to a culture, or a leadership of a culture that is incredibly stagnant and depressing. And one thing I've noticed about Meduseld as a set in the beginning hours of this film is it is incredibly dark and oppressive and lonely, and everybody feels like they're disconnected from each other. Like, we know that Éomer and Éowyn are brother and sister. We know that Theoden is their uncle, but they're all kind of suffering in their own little bubble. And a lot of this is due to Grima Wormtongue, who is just a real bad guy.
Probably the most punchable character in Lord of the Rings, honestly.
Yes. Go on with that punchability, Drew. Run with that line.
Yeah. So yeah, this is where we're introduced to Wormtongue, who is basically almost like a hand for Saruman, and he's kind of like whispering these lies to Theoden, and almost like, I guess, like in a way he's kind of controlling Rohan, and you see how like he's kind of like the one speaking for Theoden and kind of like choosing what happens in like the political side of Rohan. And in a little bit, like we find out like, you know, what his plans are whenever Éomer shows back up.
Yeah. And we should note too that Éomer came in from the remnants of a battle where a character we'd never see speak or anything, but Theodred is dying. Theodred being King Theoden's son and heir. He's brought in ridiculously wounded to the point where we only know him by proxy this entire time, which is all the more impressive for something later, but we'll get to that. But yeah, that's actually big motivation for multiple characters here, because Éowyn is caring for a very sick and wounded Theodred. Wormtongue is being like creeper extraordinaire in his treatment of Éowyn, and kind of like taking this time of grief and pain and using it as an opportunity to I mean, I don't even understand what he thinks is wooing about what he does. I guess it's just the only language he speaks is blackmail and corruption. But yeah, Wormtongue, grade A creep. Oh. What do you think, James?
It's wild to me that Brad Dourif is primarily in like low budget horror movies and B movies, because I think he is a grade A actor. He is freaking phenomenal. And he is one of the sleaziest kinds of characters ever. And honestly, I know probably most of his dialogue is taken from Tolkien. So when I praise the dialogue, that's like where I gotta give all credit. But his dialogue is so, it's like outside of Éowyn, he's saying all the wrong things to Éowyn if he's trying to get her over. But like when it comes to how he rules, how he influences Theoden, it's so like surgical. There's such precision to it, and because it's that perfect thing of like you're saying everything you want to say, everything you legitimately mean to say. Your meaning is all coming across, but in such a way that you are above reproach. You could be like, I didn't say that. This is what I said. Like it's masterful. Like this whole like feigning this care for Theoden's emotional well-being. Like he sees that he's kind of caught in that situation, and that beautiful like little acting moment where he's like, he realizes he's getting caught, and then he's like, why do you lay these troubles on an already troubled mind? And all he's like, what are you doing to your king? Like, how is it? It's so freaking, it's so good.
Yeah, the delivery too. The delivery, your malcontent.
So he loves his syllables, dude.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Drew. I interrupted.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, another thing, like with the way that like he's like super manipulative and everything, he almost like kind of like puts the blame on Éowyn for the death of Theoden's son. And like he talks about, you know, like when he says that line, like, why are you bringing more trouble onto a troubled man? like he mentioned something about how like all of these like battles that the Rohirrim and stuff have been in, like, and Rohan are fighting in, are kind of like his fault, and like, you know, like that like Rohan shouldn't be like participating in these battles against orcs and stuff like that. Even though like Saruman is bringing the fight to them, like he's almost like saying like, oh, just like let it happen. But like the way he like approaches his kind of like manipulation, it's like very convincing. Like he does it in a way to where, like, you know, just anyone there, like aside from like maybe Eowyn and stuff, would fall for what he says, but just because the way he uses his words are so like perfect, like freaking James was saying.
Yeah, and like he's gaslighting to an extreme degree in the whole scene. He's just like, Saruman the White has ever been our friend and ally, while the evidence is in front of you. That, you know, it's like, come on, man.
It's so frustrating in the moment.
Yeah, it's like it's incredible how he just proudly, confidently gaslights everyone in the room, and that's why he has to have Éomer banished, because Éomer is having absolutely none of it. And I know we're introduced to Éomer here, but we'll have a better opportunity, I think, to really go into him in another scene. But Carl Urban's Éomer is just fantastic.
One more quick thing about Wormtongue too is like, just to continue this Tolkien's trend of like being far more mature and nuanced than like any of his peers writing this kind of stuff, is despite the punchability of Wormtongue, at least for me, I still find him an immensely pitiable character. Like I think there's still tragedy within him, and not even like drawing from what ultimately happens in Return of the King. Even within here, there's a shot of, you know, whenever he's having this altercation with Éomer, and he's like, "Too long have you stalked my sister?" And it's like, oh, and Carl Urban's being awesome. And the shot of Éowyn walking by, the shot of Grima with Éomer's hands just holding, like, just engulfing his face, and his eyes look over at Éowyn, and she sees him, and he's almost like silently shouting for pity or mercy or something, or understanding or something from her. It's an incredible moment from him. His eyes are just like, they say everything in that moment, and she just swoops away and like storms off. I feel a pinch of like sadness for him and pity for him. He's the poster boy for incels, really. It's like but like
Middle Earth taxi driver.
Exactly. Iluvatar's lonely man. But yeah, like he could have just been really what Alfred is in the Hobbit trilogy, but he isn't, because there's a lot of depth to the character, and I think it's such a rich character.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now that we have feasted on the scene chewery of Wormtongue and the excellence of Rohan, let's go to a different kind of chewing with the Uruk-Hai. We are at the eve of Fangorn Forest, where like this entire scene is so freaking quotable. Just first off, whoever's idea it was to have like these orcs have these like off-color English accents.
They're fresh.
Yeah, it's amazing. And my favorite delivery of all orcs, I think, has to go to yeah. It's so dumb but so good. Like
the tongue thing that as he's like, what? I'm like, oh, so gross. It's so good.
But they're fighting over whether or not to eat Merry and Pippin, which is grotesque, and of course the way the scene is lit is wonderful for it. But
The legs, they don't eat those.
It's so quotable. Every line is perfect.
Every single one. Just a mouthful, a little bit off the flank, you know.
Oh man.
Even the Uruk-Hai captain that is just like trying his best not to have these guys eat these hobbits, where he's not out of love or pity or anything, just out of following orders, you know.
I've always kind of respected that Uruk-Hai. Well, he's
Yeah,
a
me
man
too.
on a mission. He's
Yeah.
like, he's got discipline, dude.
That's the difference, I think, between the Uruk-Hai and the orcs, is like the
Yeah.
orcs are inevitably going to end up in a Kareth Ungol situation at some point.
Yeah.
And the Uruk-Hai are, what do we call them? Like Orc Team 6 or something?
Yeah.
They're the special
They're just
forces
built
of
differently.
orcs. But yeah, the Uruk-Hai, man, like we were saying, every line is great. Every bit of this, to the point where Merry and Pippin come off as like secondary and bland in this scene. Like not through any fault of their own, but just because the orcs are so interesting this whole time. My goodness, I love this scene, and they are not for eating, you know. Like
And I mean,
and then when they start fighting, he's like, "Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys."
the money line.
Oh, it's so good.
And then the shot of the intestines just
Oh, I
flying
love
up.
you know, Peter
How is that
Jackson
in a
with him.
PG-13 movie, man?
Peter Jackson coming from those bloody splatter movies. You know, he had a field day when he got to include all those like
Yeah.
sound effects during that.
Incredibly gross moment, like that. Like you said, Drew, like how is this in a PG-13 movie? Like,
Oh yeah.
and then they just start eating the man, like, man, well, you know,
Orc.
But that even that, as silly and over the top as it is further window into orc culture, is in addition to being pillagers and just the worst kind of people, they're also cannibals. Like everything about them is terrible.
It's another instance of like, are you right in calling it silly and ridiculous and over the top? Yes, and somehow it all works. It's all like, it's so perfectly directed. And I feel like I think the setup of that scene is done so well in just a few quick lines when Pippin's like, you know, like, they think we have the ring, and Merry says, yes, once if they find out we don't, we're dead. Like, once that is like the established conflict of the scene, as you're just like, oh man, this is like,
the tension is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not clear, because like the orc captain says they have something, an elvish weapon the master wants for the war, so they don't even know what it is, you know, like they're just okay, whatever, you know. So it's not like, even if they were to like search them, it's not like they would have an idea of what they're looking for,
which makes it believable why they're not just like killing them and taking it. They're like, we don't know what it is.
Yeah, we just know we were instructed to bring them without spoiling them, which when I was younger, I didn't know like spoilment, in this case like the spoils of war, and I was like, so you want them alive and not treated well, okay. It's like, no, he means like, don't let anybody search them. He doesn't want, I think Saruman knows if those orcs find out the ring is there, they're just gonna slaughter each other and it's gonna go nowhere. So he's very precise about how just bring back the halflings, period.
Yeah.
And so,
and I think there's even he has the kind of the same secrecy in his motivations as the Fellowship does, where like the Fellowship doesn't want it known that they never wanted it known that they have the ring and that they're taking it there. And I think likewise, whenever, I don't think Saruman wants the surrounding watching world knowing that like, oh, this particular band of Uruk-Hai, they've got the freaking ring.
Right.
Like what does the world care if they're taking a couple of prisoners of war? And so just like keeping everything super hush is just, nobody wants anybody else knowing where the ring is.
Yeah. And Saruman, like, for all his talk of fealty to Sauron here, is inadvertently, like, he's trying to get the ring for himself, so he fully intends on stabbing Sauron in the back, so and then I know in the book it's made explicit that these orcs that joined up are not Isengard orcs, and so that's another source of the tension there. Here it's not explicit, and so you could just garner that the orcs and Uruk-Hai just don't like each other, and again that the Uruk-Hai are just more disciplined and mission oriented, and the orcs are more chaotic evil, so to speak.
So
I think,
established Uruk-Hai are neutral evil. There you go.
yeah, or lawful evil even.
Oh, lawful evil. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. But orcs are definitely chaotic evil. They'll kill each other. They'll kill you. They'll kill a baby. Like there's nothing they won't kill or eat, for that matter. So, so yeah, and this also introduces us to Fangorn Forest, although briefly we hear like these crazy wood creaky sounds. It introduces us to the Riders of Rohan in a somewhat dramatic way when one of the orcs gets just speared through the chest.
And then he just sounds like a squealing pig.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, and honestly, like we'll get to more of this in the later tracking scene, because it's only sort of established here that the Riders of Rohan come in at night, but like from the Hobbit's vantage point, this is terrifying.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
The orcs are terrifying. The Uruks are terrifying. The riders are terrifying. Nothing about this is fun to these guys. It's not like, hooray, we're saved. It's like, oh my gosh, this is bad.
The shots of them like running around, like the perspective shots of them running around the horses and stuff is like, it goes so far and like selling the danger from everywhere. Like it's not the good guys are here to rescue us. This is and
also lends credibility to Éomer's like non-committal answer about we might have killed them.
Yeah.
About that. Yeah, it was dark. We were just staring at things.
It's Joaquin Phoenix from Signs. It was very dark.
We might have got a squirrel for all I know. Like, that's but speaking of Éomer, we have a really, really cool scene where Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli get to stop running for a change. And they're confronted with a company of Riders of Rohan.
Our gang, Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn get captured, or not captured, but they essentially get like stopped by the Rohirrim.
Rohirrim!
I love that so much.
Yes.
But yeah, the Riders of Rohan are surrounding them. And like they have so many freaking spears, dude. Like I would be terrified if I was in that circle. Just like literally a circle of spears. It looks like Knives Out with the throne.
It's the world's most overkill traffic stop.
Yeah. I'm like, honestly,
do you know how fast you were running?
Sorry. There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, I love this scene because this is like where we really start to get introduced to Éomer, and we already like saw him before, obviously, but like this is kind of where we get a little bit more insight of like his perspective on things and kind of the after effects of him being banished and stuff. Despite them being banished, they're still riding around, killing all the orcs that they can because they actually like care about their homeland, like Rohan. And I love the whole like conversation that they have where he's Aramir's like what is it, like a man, a dwarf, and a elf doing here? And he, like, I can't remember the line that he says off the top of my head, but like he kind of makes these snarky comments about like who they are, and he asks for their name, and then Gimli says like, why don't you tell us your name? I just
Give
like
me your
love,
name, Horsemaster.
I just love how like snarky Gimli is, and like you can tell like Aragorn and Legolas are like, oh come on, really? You just had to like entice them some more, like really agitate them.
And yet Legolas is immediately ride or die, like no.
Oh, yeah.
You would die before you'll stroke that.
Yeah.
The dialogue
So
in that
good.
scene is so good, dude.
And the look on Gimli's face too, like
Yeah.
Gimli himself is
And
like
this-
that escalated quickly. And
Yeah. And like this scene right here is like kind of the really the start of the whole like bromance that Legolas and Gimli have that really comes more into fruition later on in the film.
that I love the Legolas Gimli bromance. Like,
Oh yeah,
It is awesome.
it's unmatched.
yes, in a film franchise of bromances, it towers above many.
Yeah.
So-
Two Towers specifically.
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead, James. Sorry.
No, you continue.
Yeah, it's just this the imagery of all the spears in the circle and the way they just like file around them and everything is
So good.
fantastic. And shout out to the costume design, because like when we get to Helm's Deep, it's mostly like farmers and like peasantry that are just ill-equipped, but the riders themselves, those uniforms are so
So good.
beautiful.
It's
Like the green cloaks and the horse imagery everywhere, the leather, the Eomer's helmet is freaking glorious.
So sick.
an art, dude. The decision to go with leather and earthy tones is like, oh my gosh, dude.
I know, it's so good, and it's good here, and it's good in Helm's Deep. I think the real payoff for it is in Return of the King, but man,
With Mary's helmet.
yes, yeah, Mary's helmet, and of course the ride of the Rohirrim especially, but man, the Rohirrim, great costume design, and don't take what I said about the peasants and stuff being ill-equipped as bad costume design. No, it's different,
Yeah.
but the uniforms are just so pleasant. Like if you were gonna say cosplay as a rando for any Lord of the Rings culture, I'm a rider of Rohan.
Mm.
That's probably my favorite uniform, although a strong case could be made for Gondor too. They have a very different but very cool appeal.
That white tree is
I love
So-
the guards with like the winged helmets.
that is just next level.
Yes, that's ace tier stuff. But yeah, the writers, the costume design, the weapon design, the sound design, and then of course Carl Urban leading them with just such bitterness. Like you can tell he's very like done. Like he's still very mad at Wormtongue, and you know, like yes, it's out of loyalty that he does all these things, but the bitterness in every line is apparent, and I appreciate that they didn't just paint him as this white knight figure that's like, oh yes, I'm still gallivanting the land, doing good, haha.
Absolutely brutalizing those Uruk-Hai with cathartic for him.
Yes,
He's happily
Yeah.
blowing off steam right now.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Every one of those Uruk-Hai just has Wormtongue's face on it.
Yes.
Behind, you know, it's just
It's the Suicide Squad joke with him.
Yeah, I
Everyone
was
is-
about to say that. Oh, God.
I'd love to see an edit of that. with just
Yes.
all of them are him. Yeah. But
to,
you go ahead, James. I'm sorry. I've
no,
been
you get, to continue off of like your criticism of people's criticisms that everything is too black and white and this and that. I feel like once we get past Fellowship of the Ring, it's not true at all. Like whenever with this scene, we're good guys, you know, like we're with the three good guys, we meet a huge team of good guys. This should be a haha, like allies. We've experienced nothing but orcs and Uruk-Hai and hardship everywhere. We found the Rohirrim, and it's incredibly tense, and everybody's jittery, and nobody wants to say the wrong thing, and like they're just the complex, like the political and moral complexity of the Two Towers is like so strong. And I love a line from Éomer in this scene where he's like, "Look for your friends, but do not trust a hope. It is forsaken in these lands." Like, I mean, and it speaks to that bitterness you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, we just like we here's all the good guys. They've got an army of horses and spears and stuff, and this is like, I'm more depressed now that I met these guys than I was before. And so it's just like that sense of like, all is lost, there is no hope. We're not even fighting to win, we're fighting because might as well. Like, it's again, like, leave it to Two Towers to up the depression whenever you meet the new good guys.
Yeah, and that is a continued theme going forward, because we'll get to another character that also does this in spades. But before we get anywhere near to that point, actually, in a way, we get two characters that do that. But anyway, I digress. We get this cool scene where Éomer has given them two horses, which, 3 guys, 2 horses. A little unfortunate. But it's not like Gimli was ever going to reach the stirrups anyway. So, so Gimli is riding side saddle with Legolas. But anyway, they come across the mound of dead Uruk-Hai, and another iconic image is that the head of the Uruk captain on the spear with like the tongue sticking out is just so hilariously gruesome. And like, you can just imagine, like, he's like, yeah, put that up there, just make sure that any of the Uruk-Hai coming around knows.
Pull that tongue out a little bit.
Exactly. But yeah, that big pile of burning carcasses, and the moment every Lord of the Rings fan has been waiting for, where Gimli finds one of their rebuilds. And
I love it. Gimli is so affected by that too. I love it. It's touching.
Yeah.
One of their rebuilds.
Yeah. And at that point, Aragorn, overcome with grief, just frustratedly kicks an Uruk-Hai helmet, and Viggo Mortensen breaks his toe. And they use the take because honestly, he rolls with it, and that shout of grief and pain is so real.
Yeah.
And to make matters even better, the helmet lands perfectly at the camera too.
It's so good.
It could not. It is the sequel to Viggo Mortensen swatting away the dagger in Fellowship of the Ring. Like, this man is just surrounded by incredible moments that were not supposed to happen.
God was just smiling on this production.
Yeah. But then he does more cool tracking, other than just hearing the ground. And again, he's like Sherlock Holmes to the 20th power here, where it's like, a hobbit lay here. You can't know that, man.
Yes, he can.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing I love most about that is that they intersperse his deductions with the past event. So I like that they denied us the full scene back on the looks like meat's back on the menu boys scene, and saved the reveal of what's happening for Aragorn showing it to us.
Yeah.
That's so good. And especially the cut back to the horse feet about to trample Pippin.
Oh, that's shot.
Yeah. And then they cut back to it again. And normally you're thinking, I don't want to see the same thing twice in a movie, but it's almost like a detective movie where when you see it again with new context, it's like, oh, okay. That's not what happened. And we just have like a miniature Sherlock Holmes moment in this movie. And Aragorn never really uses this skill set again, but I don't care. It's so cool.
There's a funny continuity error in it though that I'm sure y'all may have noticed. Uh, Pippin is like crawling away with his bonds, and he rolls on his back when the horse rears up, and he spreads his arms wide in panic in that, and then he rolls back over and he's bound again.
It's just a really handy horse. He untied it. It's like a close-up magic, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But that aside, the scene's amazing.
It was the Ant-Man of horses. Do we have much more to say about this, or we want to move on to the big guy?
Only at least. I'm sorry. I'll let Drew go.
Yeah, I know. You can go.
Only by way of like the greatest, or one of yet again the greatest transitions ever, of like them standing outside of Fangorn and Gimli saying like, "What madness, draw breath from within there," and then we like transition into night through the flashback, like as we pass through the trees. Like that is oh, so good.
Yeah, because it's seamless, isn't it? There's no like cut. It's like a tracking shot past leaves, and then bam, we're in the past. Yeah, that's. I forget that's there, but you know, it's funny like noticing now the way we're talking about this film. We've just been hitting great transition. Like this film just goes from point A to point B in the coolest way it possibly can every time, you know, and that is to be commended.
Beautiful editing.
Yes, absolutely. And so they're chased, and we get another CGI character that could have been terrible. Well, partially CGI because there's some practical effects going on here too. But we have John Rhys-Davies giving his second role in Lord of the Rings as Treebeard, who is just a classically misheard line is an ant, but no, it is an ent. And ents are like they get a bad rap because there's a lot of what ents are is slow and kind of boring, but I think it's put to great use in this film, and I love Treebeard. He is just wholesome goodness, and also like brimming with a certain kind of righteous anger that you just don't want to mess with. And we get that with this first scene where he gets that gnawing, breaking, biting, hacking, burning. Like that. I love the delivery of that line.
Yeah. And
you get the feeling like if he had continued on that train of thought, he would have crushed Merry and Pippin just thinking about the orcs. Exactly. You know, it's like, and of course that's foreshadowing for what ultimately will happen with the Ents. But honestly, it's again cutting back to Peter Jackson's horror-ish roots. It's kind of a terrifying creature at first.
When I was rewatching it, one thing I really noticed was how good the CGI for Treebeard still holds up. Like, I was just like really surprised, and obviously it's at night, so they kind of have that benefit with the dark shadows and everything. But like, I was like, dang, like this really holds up today. Like, and it shouldn't because it came out in 2002, but somehow it does. And yeah, like I love kind of like the whole setup that they have with the Ents and everything, and it kind of like how we were talking about earlier. Most of this film, like especially in the beginning, seems very like grounded. It's all about like the men in like the humans and everything in Lord of the Rings, but this is like kind of bringing back that fantastical kind of element back into the film, and it's like a kind of like a nice change of pace because like we've just got nothing but like really like bleakness, and we're like kind of getting a bit of like some magic stuff in it again. And yeah, like Treebeard is like such a great character, and like the whole like scene with him is just so iconic. And I love the part where he's like he thinks that they're orcs at first because of how like small they are and everything, but like they're trying to explain to him like, no, like we're hobbits and stuff.
You get the feeling his vision isn't the best.
Yeah, probably.
Still got those crusties in his eyes.
He's got some leaves in his eyes or something like that, you know.
Yeah, he's such an interesting character where like you're talking about, like there's this kind of righteous anger to him, but I love how much they lean into his eccentricities. Like he's a very like quirky character at the same time.
Tree grandpa.
Yeah, like he's like grandpa. He's getting older. He kind of says some wacky stuff. He's got his weird things, and we're like we're cool with him.
Yeah.
Like I love how he's got so much personality to him, and it's just like so much fun to watch. He had one of my favorite comedic lines, Lord of the Rings or otherwise, is the him asking about the Ent wives, like we lost them. Like, no, we lost them and we cannot find them.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that first scene though, another moment that I feel like is just in my mind again iconic is the image of the eyes first opening and Pippin's absolute shock and like letting go and falling back and his scream. It's just like you said, there's almost a little bit of a horror element to the way that it all plays out. So good.
And the camera on the ground with the orc as Treebeard rears up and just steps on him. You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
that's what I was about to mention.
Yeah.
Like that's another like super iconic scene.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I quote, don't encourage it all the time as well.
Don't encourage it. The tree is talking, Mary. Like he doesn't know it is the funny part. Yeah, the little orcs room. Like the voice is perfect too. He is very much quirky grandpa tree man, and I'm here for it because his first introduction is basically get off my lawn.
Yeah.
And the fake out we get here at the end of the scene with the maybe you are, maybe you aren't, the white wizard will know. And one of the most, I can't think of anything like it, but there's an instrumentation with like drums.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Like that happens here that's like nowhere else in Lord of the Rings, but I really love it for some reason. It's just I can't mimic.
It sounds like they like somebody knocking on wood, like they got a piece of wood, like I don't know.
As we get to the back of somebody, the White's head. Yeah, that's one of those moments that like musically, like we've been having great music after great music. We somehow failed to mention Rohan's great music, but I think there's a better rendition of it coming up anyway, a more full, rich rendition
with one of the greatest shots of all time.
Yes. So we'll get to that, but like that's one of those musical moments that stands out to me for being so very different from everything else. That slow build up to the White Wizard there. And now we get to the part where Drew's mom wouldn't let him watch. We go back to our other hobbits, and this is one of those cases where it is a hard cut, but they've left us with such a crazy cliffhanger that you don't mind. And we go to the Dead Marshes, where Gollum has, as Sam put, led them into a swamp.
Yeah, this to me is like, I mean, I guess to continue on the thread of our last conversation with music, Howard Shore is just, he's genuinely operating on another level to me with these films. And like, I have to praise him on two accounts in this scene, which is like, as they're walking by and Sméagol is just in the most creepy way describing these past battles, and it's like, you know, you'll fall in and light your own little candle, and like and there's something like the effect of the book isn't fully translated with like them holding candles and stuff, but in a weird way, like the having random fires around is its own different creepy aesthetic. So I'm like okay with it.
Well, it's based on a real phenomenon, where swamp gases will sometimes combust. And go ahead.
I may be misremembering, but I thought like part of it was like in the books, like Sméagol is actually talking about how like they're holding their candles.
That's definitely true. I think it's the same phenomenon being described, but it's like it's you definitely see the corpses holding them, you know.
Yeah.
So you're not wrong. I'm just saying, like,
gotcha.
It was weird to find out that this is based on a real thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that. Huh. Now I'm gonna have to go find like real images of that because I feel like I'd be creeped out. But like in that scene though, like as they're walking by and he's talking about this, you've got like the most ominous kind of build up music where it's just, you know, something's about to happen. Like you don't play this music unless you're building up to something, but it's I don't want to say conventional, but it's like you hear it and you're like, okay, yeah, this is the music that you kind of do. And it's expert, like it's phenomenal version of that. But then whenever Frodo falls in, all of a sudden your ears are met with like the most existentially horrifying soundscape imaginable.
Yeah.
It's
tell us about that, Drew, since you weren't even allowed to see it.
Yeah. So when I was a youngling, during that scene, my mom would like make us like cover our eyes and everything because of the ghost faces that pop out when Frodo's like falling into the most vile looking water I've ever seen. Like after that I need like 100 showers. But yeah, so like this is like a really like interesting part. And I guess like this right really plays into like the Dead Marshes because he's seeing like ghosts in the water. And you know, after he gets pulled out of like the pool that he's falling into, that's whenever they discover that something's in the sky. And it's a good old Nazgul flying on gosh, what are they called again?
The Felbeast.
The Felbeast, yes. And this is like another part where the score is just like outstanding whenever they like start running away and they hide under like a tree to like hide from the Nazgul. And they can kind of sense that it's the same Nazguls that were like chasing them from Fellowship of the Ring. And this is like, I think like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first moment in this film where we see Frodo struggling with the ring again, like we did in Fellowship of the Ring. It's like I don't know.
It might be.
I think so.
Yeah. So like yeah, like we see him like again like wanting to put on the ring and like really like struggling with like
the minor heart attack of seeing the Nazgul again.
yeah, seeing the Nazgul, but like also like hearing those whispers of like trying to tempt him to like put on the ring and like give in and everything. And yeah, like we haven't like had that in like a long while. Like it happened last in Fellowship of the Ring, and so kind of like seeing that again and like showing visually like, hey, this ring is like really difficult to carry. It's not just like anyone can carry it. And like it shows kind of like the internal struggle that Frodo has, that not any of the other characters really experience.
Yeah, and I think a less attuned mind might walk away with the conclusion that Frodo and Sam's story is so disconnected from the rest of the movie that it's not good that it's this disconnected. But I would disagree on the grounds that, like, to me, what feels like an encapsulation of Frodo and Sam's journey in this film is that overhead shot of the Nazgul flying over the swamp and you're hearing the Felbeast like weirdly kind of like sad groany cry thing, and like you're looking at this deathly swamp hellscape that they're in alone with each other and the creepiest possible guide, and that isolation from everything that is good and wholesome and even friendly. Like we just got away from Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, yes, having a tense standoff with the Rise of Rohan, but being given horses. And then we got Merry and Pippin meeting a semi-aggressive tree man and possibly Saruman, but you know, they seem to be in a better place than with the Uruk-Hai. Frodo and Sam's situation just gets progressively worse as the time goes on, and it's increasingly disconnected from anything helpful. And I think that is actually a strong narrative tool to isolate them, to separate them, to show that their journey is not one of battle and struggle. It's one of loneliness in the dark. It's often in the brain, you know, psychological in a way that the others are not. And that's part of why a lot of people walk away with Frodo being kind of a bland character, because most of his conflict is way more internal than everyone else's. And I don't agree that he's a weak character by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that the Marshes kind of highlight all of this. I mean, you have to be a very, very, very disturbed person to even want to get into that water. And for some reason, he just it's not even that like he
Tell me you haven't done that at a pool.
Yeah, exactly.
As a kid, I absolutely recreated that scene.
Oh yeah.
The little like it's not that he like dives in, he literally just planks into the water. It's so disturbing, you know. And the fact that this is going to be kind of a recurring element where Gollum and Sam work to save Frodo from doing something incredibly stupid. And it's shockingly like a point of unity between Gollum and Sam is like, no, not that. Whatever you're doing here, you know. But goodness, and Gollum gets a great chance to shine in this scene too,
and a nice little mirroring of you know, we had the fellowship ending with, you know, Frodo reaching in and bringing Sam out of the water, and now instead of Sam reaching in, it's Gollum who first, you know, puts his hand in there and pulls Frodo out.
Yeah,
so I feel like that's kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah, and the cool thing is anytime Gollum does something good for Frodo, there's a duality to it. Like, is it good for Frodo, or is it because Frodo has the ring? Like,
yeah.
And
I think it's both.
And the answer is yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, the answer is yes, both. Yes, and not or. It's both.
Something that you highlighted that I think is like so, like such an like you're saying, a point in the film's favor and not against it, is like the isolation that their plot has. And I think it's Return of the King that like highlights it the most, where like it points this out. There's the scene with Gandalf and Aragorn in the hall at Rohan, and Gandalf, or yes, Aragorn is talking about how like, oh, we've bought another day for Frodo, and Gandalf says, how do we know that Frodo is alive? And like I remember hearing that as a kid, like that blowing my mind, because I'm like, I'm the omnipotent viewer. I know what's happening in every thread. And that's the first time that it really hammers home this idea of like, they don't know what's happened since Alman Hen. They don't know anything that's going on with Frodo and Sam. They like, all of this literally could have been, for all they know, Frodo tripped on a rock in Emyn Muil and fell to his death. There's no reason that couldn't have been what happened. And so this idea like of there is a disconnect, and everything that like Aragorn and that side does, they have to do without knowledge of what's going on. They have to just put all of their hope and faith into it. Doesn't it's not on me to make sure that what they're doing is happening. I have to make sure that what is in my power to do is done. And it's the same for Frodo and Sam, but they're like, they don't know all of the Middle Earth politics going on. They don't know how the kingdoms of men are raging against everything out there. They're just like, I'm going to Mordor and I'm going to trust that our fellowship hasn't faded out there.
There's a line in the book, and I can't remember if we're hearing it from Frodo or Sam's perspective. It's actually in Return of the King. No. It's in Two Towers, the book, but Return of the King, the
Yeah.
movie. So it's when the host comes out of Minas Morgul, and I think it's Frodo that kind of internally is reflecting on like, it's too late, we failed. And he's of that opinion for the rest of the journey. Like, we're going to do this even though it doesn't mean anything anymore. And that is like the flip side of the Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, Merry, Pippin side of the fellowship going, we might have failed and don't know it yet, but we're just going to have to do it. And there are two characters that best embody this idea of complete despair, no sense of hope to the future, and they face it very differently. And we'll get to these guys later in our analysis, but the Dead Marshes, man, is a real mood setter for Frodo and Sam's journey as a whole, and for Gollum's journey, because I don't know if you guys know this, but the scene where Gollum is like stroking his hand and you think for a second, oh, does he have the ring? You know, like, and it turns out, of course, he doesn't, but he's just kind of like weirdly sympathizing in his odd Gollum way with Frodo. This segment was supposed to have the flashback that's the prologue of Return of the King.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Frodo says that, you were once not so different from a hobbit, were you, Sméagol? And then bam, we were supposed to get that flashback. And then there's a vestige of that because the what did you call me is supposed to be coming out of that scene, like he's remembering that for the first time. I think I actually prefer what happened in the films, but that's just a cool vestige of what they were planning. And also, I think part of me thinks that Peter Jackson was like, the Academy is not noticing Andy Serkis because his face isn't on screen, so let's get him on screen for the last one. so I feel like there's a bit of that motivation going on. Plus, Return of the King did need a prologue, so yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and I love the way they play it here, because by removing that from the Two Towers, it forces you to exclusively sympathize with him through his current state. You don't get to see a very like a hobbit like creature from him and then be like, oh, okay, I can rationalize my sympathy here. This is tragic. It's like, no, you in Two Towers you get Gollum. That's just who you have, in terms like visually. And so that's humanizing him exclusively. Do what?
That's who Frodo and Sam have too. So you're kind of seeing it from their point of view.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that bit of real sympathy from him when he's like, says to Frodo, you're like, once it takes hold, it never lets go. Like,
yeah,
that shared understanding of the ring is just so profound.
Yep. And he excludes, like, he'll constantly do this. He excludes Sam, but the fat one cannot know. But in a way, it's right, like, and it comes back again later in the film, but Sam intellectually understands that the ring is corrupting Frodo. He understands intellectually that it corrupted Gollum, but because he isn't in the position, he's kind of lacking in understanding on a sympathetic level what it's doing to these two guys. And obviously Frodo sees himself in Gollum, or at least a potential future self in Gollum, and that motivates that compassion and that pity. in a way that Sam just doesn't get. And I like the way you put it too at the beginning of all of this, James, that they're both right. Like Gollum is, as Sam puts, a villain, but a pitiable villain, and not one we should just slay for no good reason. Like it
were
is.
We to do it all over again, we still wouldn't take Sam's advice there.
Right. Exactly. Especially knowing how it all unfolds. Anyway, we get to the Black Gate of Mordor. We see the gate, of course, and I love the mechanisms behind it, the trolls on the giant levers that open it, and it's just like, man, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Hideous, but beautiful, if you know what I mean. I love the Black Gate. I love this scene with, here we have that continued threat of corruption of men, because we have the Easterlings marching in. And to me, it's silly that they see this for more than a second and think we're going to go in this way.
They got them cloaks.
Yeah, I love the gusto, but guys.
Can't call them cowards, dude.
No,
they were ready to run straight through that sucker.
That would have been the dumbest possible move ever. Like you said, you can't call them cowards. But gosh, Drew.
Thanks, look at it. Like you were saying, the practicality behind this is really cool. We get that shot of like all of the orcs like kind of lined up, like guarding the gate, and like right behind the gate, there's kind of like the wheel where all of the cave trolls are like essentially like pushing this wheel to like open up the gate and like close it, which is like really freaking cool. And then also like it shows like such a grand scale of like how big this gate is, and like kind of how meaningful it will be in the future. And then I also like really like the part where Frodo and Sam end up like falling down the hill, and like it's so freaking suspenseful because you have this massive army just rolling through this gate, and like if they get spotted, like that's it. Like there's such a sense of like urgency because Frodo has the ring, and it's like like a small mistake like that for where they're at could end everything. And so
gift wrapped
like
the ring.
Yeah, like it's so suspenseful, and like we finally get to see one of the purposes of the capes or the cloaks that they're given back in Fellowship of the Ring, and like they throw it over them, and it's shaped like the rock, which is like it's so like another one of those things where it's so ridiculous but it works so well. It's so cool.
It's one of those cable rocks that hides the cords and stuff.
There's a big key.
It reminds me of the rock that George Lucas inserted to like put in front of R2 in A New Hope, the special edition.
Everybody knows it's fake, but we choose to ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool effect.
Yeah. The logistics of that scene don't make a lot of sense to me, but it's one of those weird things that Peter Jackson just kind of gets away with. Because the Easterling's like legit like 15 feet away from them by the time they pull the cloak. Like, he's right there. But in the moment, you're like, I don't know why, but I'm buying all of this. Like, none of this is like messing with me.
Yeah, you're like, that was so close. It's the entire feeling of that moment. Yeah. But I don't think that kind of thing happened in the book, but I think we needed it in the movie, just to hammer in how dumb of an idea it would be to go this way, because Gollum is incredibly suspect in this next exchange, and we need to feel desperate enough to have to trust him. You know what I mean? And this scene does a good job of saying, this is not a way we can go. Like, this is the front door to Mordor, and one does not simply walk into Mordor, as Boromir would say. So Yeah, the way too where Gollum proposes another way, and Sam's like, "Why haven't you mentioned this before?" And he says, "Because Master did not ask. He said, take us to the gate." And it's like, that's true. That's strictly true. But come on, man. You have to know, like, he's not there to see it. That's
Pretty impressive.
yeah. It's like it's a tourist destination. They get there. There's like a photo booth with little cards you get to take home. It's like, no, that's not why they're here. So you do get the distinct impression that Gollum is being incredibly shifty here.
Yeah.
But you have to have it shut off from them. You have to have this feeling that this is literally impossible. Can't be the way to go. And also has the benefit of being like, yeah, Mordor is freaking powerful.
Great set design too. There's a great shot of the three of them overlooking the Black Gate, and it's a complete live action recreation of either John Howe or what is the other? There's the two big Tolkien artists.
Yeah, it's Howe and
it's something Lee, right?
Yeah, so I'm going Stan Lee, Chris Lee, no.
Alan Lee.
Alan Lee.
That's it.
It is Alan Lee. Yep. Yeah. I love that shot too. And the diegetic music, because it's rare that we get diegetic music, but the chant of the Easterlings.
So cool.
Yeah, and whatever they're singing, like
their armor, dude.
Oh, yeah.
So sick.
Yeah, yet another grade A costume design. It's a shame that we don't actually see them anywhere but here.
Yeah. We see a couple of them on the musicals and in Return of the King.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, it's a really cool costume, and yeah, again, like I said, we're continuing the thread that not all men are good here. These guys are marching to the aid of Sauron, and if for nothing else than that, then they're just scary. And Frodo and Sam are going to continue to have bad run-ins with men this entire way, really.
Tracking the footsteps of two young hobbits.
Where are they?
They passed this way the day before yesterday. They met someone they did not expect. Does that comfort you?
Who are you? Show yourself!
And a surprise visitor, Josh Mesker, is joining us for at least the last half of this first half. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. Good to be here at the 11th hour.
Which is perfect because we are coming in at the return of a beloved character. We go back to Fangorn Forest, but not to Merry and Pippin. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go into the forest, and there's a white wizard there. Big, scary white wizard. Josh, you have not had an opportunity to speak, so if you want to go first about this scene, just anything you've noticed or like about it or want to point out about it. Gandalf's back, baby.
Yeah, and we haven't seen him for a while since his fall in Fellowship of the Ring, and it's truly an emotional and powerful moment. It's, at first it's dark and mysterious and kind of scary. You don't know who it is. They don't know who it is. And Gandalf reveals himself in the white around him, and that bright light and his kind face, the tone shifts and changes completely. And there's relief and all those emotions that would come with a dear friend essentially coming back from the dead. And that's really what that scene symbolizes is, is a resurrection of sorts.
Of sorts. of the only sort there is, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that's not true. Nazgul are
Yeah.
ish.
Neither living nor dead.
Yeah, neither living nor dead. So yeah.
Kind of like being a parent.
You feel thin, sort
Oh,
of
he did
stretched,
it.
like butter scraped over too much bread.
Yeah.
What
Regular
that's
basis.
such a beautiful metaphor, dude. It feels so right. You immediately know what he's thought. You're like, yeah, I felt that way before.
Yeah, most people feel that at work. But jokes aside, one awesome effect in this scene is the blending of Ian McKellen and Christopher Lee's voice. And like you're never quite sure is Saruman speaking or is Gandalf speaking? And again, the answer is yes. Gosh, that I love that bit, and it is kind of a cheap move. Even though we get the I'm Saruman as he should have been, it is kind of a cheap move, but I don't even care. It's so cool.
Yeah,
it's just neat.
The line is awesome.
Yeah.
It's such a good line.
Come to find out, he is a conjurer of cheap tricks.
Nice.
and not so cheap ones. So it's both.
I feel like it's really notable. It speaks to like how well the film achieves this dour tone that we're talking about, that like Josh hasn't been here for this whole conversation, and yet what he highlights in that scene is this just huge tonal shift that happens in that, because everything prior is just bad, getting worse. It's it's so oppressive, it's so hopeless, it's so dour. This is the first time in this movie, a movie that's been on for a very long point up until this, the first time we have any real spark of hope. The only time in this movie so far that was like, oh my gosh, finally, like this return of Gandalf. And it's not even like a small thing. It is for after like an hour and a half of hopelessness, all of a sudden, are we gonna win this thing? Like Gandalf is back. It's such a wonderful moment. Like, just look to Gimli's face for all you need to know. It's just like, oh, Gandalf from him. It's like
and I come back to you now at the turn of the tide. Indeed, and I love too that there's like this like sort of like baby Gandalf moment where he's like, yeah, that's what they used to call me, like
Gandalf the Grey.
Yeah, like he's still wise and learned and knowledgeable, but he's still like, it's like he's just waking up.
Yeah,
I
love that.
Yeah, it's almost like Obi-Wan going, I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid.
Yeah,
that is
not really, but
pure senility on his part. Like,
yeah, no, it's they're actually nothing alike.
Let's say. Also,
FYI.
A moment that I also really love in that scene is the kind of like friendly nature that Gandalf has with people. Like, whenever Aragorn says like, well, there's one thing that hasn't changed, you still speak in riddles, and Gandalf just like looks at him and smiles and like gives him a quick little laugh. I'm like, I love this. I love these guys so much.
I think my favorite, and I think it's an extended edition only line, but I quote it all the time. Well, or misquote it, like rearrange it or whatever, is the new Gandalf is grumpier than the old one. After Gandalf is like, Merry and Pippin are quite safe, and they're about to be safe. They're much safer than you're about to be. It's really not all that grumpy from Gandalf, but I just love the way Gimli's like, oh, jeez. Yeah, Gandalf being back is a huge boon and tonal shift, and I love to Legolas. Forgive me, like a lot of times he can be bland. Like we're talking about a character who a lot of times his focus on screen is just summarizing everything you've just heard.
A diversion.
Exactly. But kudos to Orlando Bloom as Legolas when after Gandalf is revealed and he just kneels and he goes, forgive forgive me, I mistook you for Saruman. Like something about the way he says that, like I really like that line.
As an elf, he understands like the kind of reverence that someone like Gandalf deserves.
Yeah, yeah. Just the way he, I don't know. I love the body language, the delivery of the line. I mean, you could call it flat, but I think it's not. And it's rare that we get good character moments from Legolas like that. So I like the
My childhood hero you're talking about.
well, we get awesome action moments from Legolas on the regular, but character moments a bit few and far between. So, and also like to cap off this scene, we have all right. Show of hands here. You're playing a video game. The video game has horses. You get a white horse. What do you name him? Always Shadowfax. The coolest horse in all of fiction.
The lord of all horses.
Yes, exactly. The reverence, like I want to say, I can't remember where I heard this from. But somebody made the comment that like somebody who loves horses shot this scene, like
It's so beautiful.
it's so good. Like the way the whistle, first off, really cool sound effect.
Oh yeah, the
I
whistle's
do that all the
so
time.
good. Yeah, same.
It's a fantastic whistle. But then the shot of Shadowfax running up in slow-mo, it also a 90s poster, but not for wizards. it's a teenage girl poster. But goodness, man, Shadowfax is
And Howard Shore.
horse. And the music swelling when they ride out together. Ah, my goodness.
So good.
What in the world? What did you say?
Yo, Gollum got the drip.
I
Oh,
can't.
man.
I'm not gonna humor this any more than I can. I'm just gonna let that speak for itself, Josh. Anyway, yeah, they ride out to a place because Theoden is very not okay. And when they get to the gates of Rohan, first off, like the great comedic relief of you'll find more cheer in a graveyard. It's so good. I love that line from Gimli. But yeah, Edoras looks, I mean, not terrible in the sense of like bad filmmaking, but terrible in like these guys are very unhappy.
Yeah.
The mood of Edoras is bad. And then when they get stopped at the gate, in addition to the staff thing, I always just love how many freaking knives Aragorn has.
Yeah.
Like it's like sword, knife here, knife here, knife. Gimli's just like one axe, But like Aragorn is just pulling weapons out of every conceivable place there could be a weapon.
Yeah.
But
I
I
love.
love. Oh.
No, you go.
Okay. I was gonna say I love like the part where they try taking Gandalf's staff, and whenever like he says the line of like, "Oh, you wouldn't take like an old man's walking stick." Like right after that, he looks at Aragorn and like winks at him, and it's so subtle. Like if you blinked, you would miss it, but like it's just it's so good.
Yeah. It's that continuing thread of that, like their friendliness with it, because it's like it's a very sly wink. It's like look at this.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sticking the sucker in there, and Aragorn's like, oh yeah, I love it.
when
Like
you
when
and
you're
your bro
sneaking
sneak
like
candy
snacks
into the
into
movie
the
theater.
theater. Yeah.
That's so fun.
It's funny we came up with the same metaphor.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Y'all, it's, tiny rabbit trail. There was one time, so Rachel and I almost never buy the snack. We'll buy the popcorn and the drinks, but the candy is just ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get like Reese's Pieces and she'll bring it in her purse, right? One time they did a bag search
Oh gosh.
and they found the Reese's Pieces and I was like, okay, fine, whatever, I'll take them back. I taped them to my body and brought them back in anyway. So yeah, that's a crazy.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, speaking of smuggling stuff in where it doesn't belong, that's just a little rabbit trail. I thought and I might leave that story in because that's just fun.
You should.
When we get inside, we have the Exorcism of Theoden, and I love this whole scene. And again, if the meme counter is up, we've got like half a dozen here. So anybody want to get into the exorcism scene and the like Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli punching their way through all the armed guards?
Yeah, I love the way magic is visualized here with like I say this as a hardcore Hobbit apologist. I love those three films unironically, but a moment in Desolation of Smaug I'm not a huge fan of is like the kind of magic battle that he has with Sauron, where it's like it's the bubble and it grows and it leaves and it's like it's super flashy and it's very CGI-ish. To me there's incredible effectiveness in what they do here, and then like in Return of the King when he shines the light at the Nazgul, it feels powerful. Like in this scene, to just like whenever he throws off the gray cloak, the brightness that it's like a Moses from Mount Sinai moment of just like the brightness is overpowering, and to just point the staff. I'm going to point the staff even harder this time. It's like this. You somehow, without any effects or trickery, you just feel all of the power that Gandalf possesses, and it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that too, because it's like, not that I have a problem with like flashy wizards and flashy magic, but one thing I love about how Gandalf wields it is with mystery. He never fully shows just how powerful he can be until the time calls for it.
Yeah.
And just kind of like you said, James, and I really like that. I like how, I know this sounds weird too, but I like how seemingly grounded the magic is.
Yeah.
And almost like earthy, this is not Harry Potter, not that I have an issue with Harry Potter. In fact,
it depends on the Harry Potter film too.
Magic changes from movie to movie sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're not talking about Goblet of Fire or anything. But yeah, I've always thought that was really neat thing about Gandalf. I mean, even when he's in Fellowship, when he's fighting the Balrog, he shows his power, but it's just such in a grounded, understated way. Like he breaks the entire bridge, but it just, he doesn't automatically blow apart. It doesn't. It's not flashy in the least.
So much of it is in sound design.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it is in sound design and just implication of effect rather than showing the effect. And it could easily, like, fantasy magic could easily devolve into fireballs and lightning.
Fireball, fire.
He can't fire.
Magic missile.
And to be fair, Saruman totally does magic missile in Return of the King. So, like, it can and does do it even here. But generally speaking, in Lord of the Rings, like, it is understated is the right word. It's like magic is happening and you see the effect, but you don't see anything about what causes it. It just kind of happens, and then you're left dealing with the after effects of it, and it's incredibly restrained most of the time.
I would also say too that the film, without saying it but with showing it within this universe, shows the difference between light magic and dark magic too, just visually. which I find pretty cool. I mean, you said it yourself. Saruman is a bit flashier, and I think there's a direct correlation between that and his lust for power, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get to a really, really cool effect in this scene. Speaking of magic and cool effects, after Theoden is exorcised and he's slowly returning to his old self, that shot of Bernard Hill just like losing all that hair and stuff, like it's so freaking seamless.
Mhm.
Like it should look terribly goofy and stupid, and it doesn't.
It's
Like,
amazing.
it is so good. There's never been a moment of de-aging happening in a movie that's been better, I don't think.
No.
The
And
really
right up front.
the really stunning thing about this movie and just the trilogy as a whole is that, I'm not saying all of them, but a vast majority of the visual effects have held up over the past 20 some odd years and will continue to.
Yeah.
There doesn't need to be a Lord of the Rings special edition, right?
We already
We have it all. We have it. It's called the extended edition, right? So
this really also marks the first time of actually really being introduced with the Theoden that matters. And the music here is amazing. And I know sometimes it can be boring listening to criticism of film where it's just like, oh, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. But this is awesome.
Talking about the Lord of the Rings, people.
This is Lord of the Rings, right?
You know what you signed up for when you click this video. It's awesome. And the theme of Rohan really comes into there's kind of like two themes to Rohan. There's the na 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 na, and then there's this more like regal theme that's present here as Theoden's coming back, and it's not as melodic, so I'm not really able to replicate it as well, but it's both of those themes are great in these scenes. We get the establishing shot of Edoras with the more familiar Rohan theme, but we get this really cool regal Rohan theme for the de-aging effect, and both of them are really cool.
I was about to say, man, we just skipped by that establishing Edoras shot, which is like, that's what I was referring to earlier, like that shot being like just mind-boggling, between like with the three horses riding towards the lone hill and the music behind it is like chill inducing.
Yes. Rohan is a fantastic place as far as setting, music, costuming. Like I just love this place. And even in Return of the King, where we leave Rohan and we're just left with the Rohirrim, it's just, you feel Rohan. It's just
their tents are Rohan. They look like Rohan tents.
Yes, exactly. It's just like Rohan is just oozing charm and personality. And yes, that personality is horses, but who cares? It's awesome. It's just so good. And Theoden coming to his senses, and
I know your face.
Yeah, which again we'll come back to that again, because that's repeated in another heartbreaking moment. A series of heartbreaking Theoden moments is coming, because this is in many ways one of the more tragic and also triumphant characters in the series, which is a cool blend. Tolkien does a lot, a tragic, triumphant figure, and I think Theoden just might be the granddaddy of them all. Like, I love this character so much, and I love Bernard Hill's performance of this character. It's just great.
Yeah, I may have to like restrain myself on this subject, because I feel like I could probably talk about Rohan and Theoden for like the years that Ryan and I have been friends. I've seen numerous occasions of just gushing over Theoden as maybe the most underrated character of the series. And it's just like he's one of the most perfectly realized fictional characters ever to me. I love
His
him.
art is complete and perfect and bent exactly the right way. I can't imagine making it better. I can't. And I do generally have a pretty good imagination for how I would tweak things. And when it comes to Theoden, I just don't see it. And in a way, a good working definition of perfection is if you removed something, it would no longer work. And that is the case with Theoden. Like everything that is here is essential and everything that is here is good. And we can't do away with any of it. It's a mousetrap. It can't be simplified. It's perfect, you know? And we're going to get to that in two ways, because first off, he's extremely mad at Wormtongue, which
You had me calling like a beast.
yes. And we have yet another pity moment where we have this character where many of us, myself included, are like, I can see hacking his head off here. You know, but we have Aragorn showing restraint and mercy, and you know, the line of enough blood has been spilt on his account is a really good line. And of course, as all bad guys do, he spits on his hand and runs away. But
get out of my way.
Yeah, he's unable to accept the mercy and the embarrassment. But that's a great character moment for Aragorn. We've been talking about the transitions in this movie. He asks about Theodred, about his son, and we cut to funeral time. And the funeral, I think the singing for the funeral is only in the extended edition. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Eowyn's song is, I mean, I don't know a word she says, but it sounds pretty rough. Like the way
it's devastating.
It is
Whatever
devastating.
she says, it's utterly devastating.
Yeah.
She's winning an Oscar with her performance there.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% true.
Yeah, it's between that or the soup that she makes.
But I genuinely do think that her performance of that singing is affecting, like the way, like she does look like she's in pain as she's singing it. And you know, it's her cousin, but yeah, it's a good little funeral scene. But to me, the crown jewel of this is afterwards, where we have Theoden on the funeral mound. Somebody take this away from me, or I will keep us here till midnight. Might be my favorite Theoden scene, and there's only one other contender, I think. No one? Okay, I'll keep us here till midnight.
I was gonna say, it looks like James wants to talk about it.
I just wanted to leave room, because I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, go ahead, James. Take it away.
This is maybe it's the most emotional I feel in the Two Towers. Like it is absolutely, it's so powerful and it's so devastating. First of all, like the transition from the funeral to this scene again is incredible, of like hard cut on the song and that great sound design moment of it just sounding like these stone walls closing in, and we see the closed tomb and like him holding the flower and just lamenting the fact that his son has died before him, and that the line, "Alas, that these evil days should be mine," is maybe one of the most incredible lines ever put to paper to me. And just spending that whole scene of a father who feels like he failed his child. His child is dead, and he was, for all intents and purposes, missing in action for the past. He was just gone mentally for the past, this last however long this has been, and has allowed his reintroduction to all of this is nothing but depression and horror and death. And whenever he can't continue to speak the lines and he just breaks into tears, it's almost hard to watch. Like, I'm convinced that Bernard Hill lost a child before shooting this. It's beyond, it's not like the movie crying. It's like, no, I saw a human being weep after a lot. Like, it's haunting.
It may be my favorite example of an actor crying in a film.
Yeah.
And I think I wish I could credit this one as well. There was an observation made, and I think it's well made. It's not crying, it's the trying not to cry and failing that is like the most affecting. And you kind of see that with like the covering his face and the, like, I don't know. It's just like you said, James, it's so human. Like, there is nothing that could happen to take me out of that scene. And the fact that we can walk away feeling this affected by a character who does not have a line, like, we don't know Theodred from anyone, and just dealing with Theoden's grief, we barely know Theoden at all, but immediately the sympathy is there. Like, we feel what this guy is feeling, and the his whole rant there, or monologue there, ever they covered the tombs of my forefathers, now they shall cover the grave of my son, and no parent should have to bury their child. It's like, if you don't feel that, are you even human?
Well, and that's what that scene is. We may not know, we barely know him, we didn't know his son really at all, but it brings us into that human moment in such a way that's universal, because parents do have to bury their children more often than people like to think about. And it's tragic, and it's evil, and it's unjust. The very idea, that a child would die before their parents would, in some way. And so that, and being a father, you don't have to be a father to be brought into that, obviously, and to feel that. But being one myself, it's the greatest fear that you have. And so, yeah, I'd say that scene affects me pretty heavily.
Yeah, I'm so glad we had you on for this, Josh. Like, you could not have, your return could not have been more timely.
Well, I do like how Gandalf does try to cheer his spirits, Gandalf is calming and as encouraging as he can be, given the gravity of the situation, where he says, and I even pulled it up because I wanted to double check, where he says, Gandalf says, he was strong in life and his spirit will find the way to the halls of your fathers. That
He just went hard, dude.
What's that?
That's the Tolkien just went hard. These lines are just like, just otherworldly.
But those two lines is exactly what Theoden needed to hear.
Yeah.
In that moment. And basically, your son's life wasn't in vain. And guess what? He is he's with your father and his father before him, and he's safe and in paradise. And so yeah.
And not to give up the ghost too much here, because we're going to be talking a lot about Theoden and with respect to this in the future. But quickly, I want to outline something. Quick Return of the King spoilers. If you haven't seen it, just go skip 20 seconds ahead or something. But when Theoden dies, his monologue of I go to my fathers in whose mighty company I shall not now be ashamed, like, is an echo of the his spirit will find his way to the halls of your fathers. And also, if you notice, when Saruman is taunting Theoden, what does he say? You're a lesser son of greater sires. Like, there is a deep insecurity in Theoden that he is not doing enough for his people. And his arc is of going, well, no, I may have inherited the worst possible time, but I am going to do the best I can. And that is exactly what makes him a great king. So hats off to Theoden, one of the most underappreciated characters in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And hats off to French beret caps off to Bernard Hill for a performance that is out of this world amazing. For he didn't have to, but he put in the best that could be done, I think.
The layers to the character is just insane, because like you said, he's a great king so often, but there is the reason that taunt is effective is because there is genuine insecurity there. Like Theoden is there's times where he's trying to tout his power, like when last I checked, Aragorn, Theoden was king of Rohan. Like he's like, no, this is my place, like he feels a need to like,
assert
let
himself.
people know, like exactly, to like make up for lost time almost.
Even like ignoring the advice of riding out to meet Isengard in open battle. And that's a bit of a technical point, because like Gimli, a dwarf, is like they flee to the mountains when they should stand and fight. Like nobody other than a dwarf would suggest, oh yeah, we should definitely go to the mountains and fight. But what he's getting at is the strength of Rohan is in their horsemen. Like on the field, they are unbeatable, and Theoden is relying on Helm's Deep in part because that is the refuge of his ancestors. Like, this is what they have done. This is what they would have done. So this is what I'm going to do. And it's living in the shadows of his predecessors and that insecurity that leads to what could have been an enormous tactical blunder with Helm's Deep, and in many ways was an enormous tactical blunder with Helm's Deep. But yeah, the layers of his character are phenomenal. And we're sort of touching on the departure from Edoras here, but we do have to track with another Rohan character who is also incredibly important and has a wonderful arc in this story, and that's Éowyn with her first meeting with Aragorn here. And she, like us, is smitten immediately. And
Viggo Mortensen, man.
Yeah, I mean, can you blame her? But also, like, I love the insight to her character right away when she's practicing with the sword, and Aragorn is complimenting her for it, and remarking that she's a shield maiden of Rohan.
As a kid, sorry.
You go ahead, James.
Sorry, as a kid, I misheard his line for like years, and I thought he insulted her. Like whenever he says you have some skill with a blade, as a kid, I always thought he said use some skill with the blade. Like he was mad that she almost cut him, and I'm like, dang, Aragorn's freaking savage.
Well, he does swat down her advances a few times, so you'll have plenty of Aragorn savage points to dish out. Although he's pretty great about it, but still, yeah. the bit about what do you fear, because she says we fear neither death nor pain, and the cage line, is so good. Like, when she says it, I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of too. Like, it's so good. The what does she say? She says, I fear a cage, to be basically left alone to die with no chance of valor or glory, and that is a pretty sad fate that she fears. And it's evident from before this moment. Like when we're seeing her caretaking for Theoden and for Theodred, it's like she's very unfulfilled in this existence. And part of it is she has like the worst stalker ever on her tail, but part of it is also that she feels like she's meant for something more glorious, you know. And Eowyn's just a great character.
I got that line pulled up if I can read it real quick because it's phenomenal.
Yes, it is.
It says, "What do you fear, my lady?" And she says, "To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them, and all chance of valor has gone beyond recall or desire."
The or desire kills me. Like, it's like, yeah. What a great line. Among great lines. Like, this whole section here is just dialogue heaven, I think.
It's like the entire trilogy. It's hard to pick at least, you know, and I don't mean that sarcastic at all. It's like, I mean, you just move from one dialogue rich scene after another. Action doesn't have to be occurring for it to be fascinating and engaging. And that's when you know you have a good film.
Mhm.
And there is no shortage of action ahead of us.
No.
We only have a couple more scenes left. They decide to depart from Edoras to go to Helm's Deep, which we won't get to in this part, but we'll have a lot to say then. And Gandalf also departs from them with "Look to my coming at the first light, the fifth day at dawn, look to the east," in a very cryptic manner. He just bolts on them. And so Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli tag along with Rohan. What were you saying, James?
I said, I'm a head out.
Yeah.
That is exactly what Gandalf does. So, yeah.
It's great. It's great timing. It's great timing.
Great Tolkien dialogue.
I'm a head out.
Yeah. The funny thing about that is, like, the thing Wormtongue accused him of, where Lath spell I name you, ill news is an ill guess. They call him Gandalf Stormcrow. And what's the first thing he does is like back up that theory. Like, I only come to stir trouble and then leave. Like, dude, you just rehabilitated your image with these people. But yeah, I love that. But I think we need to finish out with where disc 1 of a physical copy of The Two Towers would end, which is in Ithilien, where we have three major scenes to go through here. The first being this really cool dialogue between Gollum and Sméagol, which we have praised Andy Serkis to the moon and back, and this is a big part of it, I think.
A crowning achievement, really.
Yes, and James, before we go, I'd like to hear a Gollum impression, because you're among the best I know. So, at any point you want to give us a Gollum, it's a welcome interruption.
You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you.
So good. That's probably, I remember that, like, I don't remember individual moments a lot of the movie in the theater experience, but I remember that because that's one of the moments where everybody just cracked up laughing. You don't have any friends.
Not listening.
Yeah, not listening is good too. But the start of that scene where the camera just kind of swings back and forth as you switch between Sméagol and Gollum, and then later on it just does shot counter shot like you would do in normal dialogue. Amazing.
That kind of technical stuff of establishing it with the one take of moving back and forth and then doing that. I love that kind of filmmaking stuff. That's so cool.
Because you're establishing this is one person, two characters. You know, like that's so good. The dialogue itself is very much Gollum, the bad part of Sméagol, is trying to win out here and basically saying we've survived because of me. We need to take the ring. Sméagol, who's I think been a long dormant part of Gollum at this point, awoken by the kindness of Frodo, is for the first time in probably since Gollum has had the ring, coming out on top here. And the line that ends this dialogue with the Sméagol is free that trails off into the next scene. I love that so much.
It's such a tragic scene on rewatches because you're almost hoping that there's a different Return of the King out there that ends with him still there. Is you love Gollum, man, or you love Sméagol. You root for him so hard.
Yeah. The leave now and never come back, and then the increasing agitation of Gollum.
So good.
It is. It really is. And one thing they also do, another technique is in the book, it described like flashing lights in his eyes. And they do that in the film. Like Gollum and Sméagol's eyes are different. It's so good. From top to bottom, this scene is fantastic. It's often what the Two Towers is most remembered for, if not for Helm's Deep, than for this.
Yeah, everybody was quoting "Leave now and never come back." Everybody.
Yeah, everyone being like mostly Tolkien fans. Everybody was quoting "My Precious."
Well, but I feel like that scene was like parodied like 8,000 times in like the following years.
It was for sure. And like I think sometimes we do a bit of a disservice by being like, oh, he has multiple personalities, or oh, he's dealing with this particular mental disease. It's like, yes, and I think that is a frame of reference, and yes, drug use is a frame of reference, but this is its own thing, and we should kind of let it be that own thing. It's a deeply sad thing that we can use those other kind of things like multiple personalities to sympathize with, but I don't think they map on in a one-to-one comparison exactly.
Because I feel
because there's an in-universe explanation to why Gollum and Sméagol even exists, as they do, or he does. They do. Oh well. Anyway, that goes.
Him.
But Gollum represents the ring's Gollum and Sméagol, and that tension between them, which is really the tension within a single being, is a example of the ring's corruption.
And we have to remember this is a guy that had 500 years with no one else to talk to.
Yeah.
I think something important that Josh said was
I just want 5 minutes without somebody to talk to. But that's a different discussion.
But something that Josh said that I think is a good point, though, is that like it's tension within a single being. Like I feel like the people who latch onto the stuff that Ryan mentioned earlier are missing kind of Tolkien's point, which is that it's an extraordinary circumstance with Gollum, but really there's something also deeply human about it. And I think it's the reflection of like us, like it's how often we like feel torn between things. It's the shoulder angels. It's so there's
but now all I can think about is Emperor's New Groove.
Emperor's New Groove, exactly.
And talk about a tonal shift.
Yeah, but like there is this whole idea that this is yes, in a way it's the two characters, it's Sméagol and Gollum, but at the same time it's this inner conflict within this person.
Just an all-time great scene, I think. And then we switch into not only Sméagol being free, but then the another incredibly memeable moment that I can't hear without having to suppress a mountain of memory. Potatoes. And,
Stick them in a stew.
yes, exactly. The scene where Gollum comes giddily with the rabbits, and
Sorry. It's just the look on his face. Like it just all of a sudden it happened. Like it just like you are just like on crack, dude.
it's the way he laughs in that scene particularly gets me. It's funny. And
the interesting thing about it is that continues to with Sam. It just heightens Sam's skepticism and distrust of Sméagol even more. It just amps up that conflict between them even more. That's pretty fascinating, actually.
Yeah, their debate over food is hilarious because like Sam is clearly like a connoisseur of food. Like he's very proud of his pots and pans and his cooking ability. And here comes this thing that may as well just be eating garbage.
And just the way when he just like Gollum retches like like
the way he like breaks the bunnies open too is like he's so freaking happy about it, and then like everybody else is just like, dude, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think I'd rather him try to kill me than this. This is unbearable.
It's only the second worst food crime in this saga.
Yeah.
It's the distant second, if we're being honest.
Yeah. The other one you're referring to is in my top 5 favorite scenes in the entire trilogy. But
yes. And this is a series where just a few scenes back we had cannibalism, and that's not even first.
Cannibalism
with the Uruk-Hais eating the and then anyway, so
gosh, that reminds me of a random line from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where making that, my friends, is called cannibalism, and it is frowned upon in most societies.
Not
actually low-key like that movie. A lot of people don't. Anyway, continue.
You're fine. You're absolutely fine. I appreciate the color to the conversation. But yeah, it's not frowned upon in orc society, and I'm pretty sure Gollum wouldn't say no to cannibalism if there was anything else left like him.
Is this the scene where I'm forgetting where this is in the film, when he's after the fish and he's like just going down the whole stream? Is that connected here, or is that later?
Yeah, I think that was just before this.
Okay. Well, because I feel like talking about Gollum, for some reason that scene is so important to me, like in thinking about Gollum, where like Frodo and Sam have a conversation that completely lays out, like everything is then put out on the table, and like Sam makes all of his like hesitance clear, and Frodo just comes out and says, I pity him. I know what he's going through. I know, like, everything kind of comes to a head, and we understand at the most full what each people think. And there's a shot in it that I just think is like,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, whenever he looks over at Gollum and he didn't get the fish, and Gollum just turns over with the smile of like a toddler who just now realized his parents are like out there watching him. It is, I want to hug Gollum at that part. I want to befriend him. I want to this is another scene where it's like you're wanting there to be a different Return of the King. You want so badly for things to be different. He needs a friend and affection and kindness to lure him back, because there is Sméagol there, and he he needs it's that shot, that smile is just like, it breaks me down every time.
That and Frodo's dialogue, I have to believe he can come back, is
Me too, Frodo.
like, and for us it's like it's just pure sympathy, and for him it's just deeper because it's happening to him.
Yeah. If he can't come back,
then I can't.
Yeah.
It's like that's the unspoken Finnish version of that sentence is, I have to believe he can come back for my own sake.
Yeah. Which again is just like goes over Sam's head completely. And so all of the tension in that relationship is so believable.
Yeah. And again, like we're gonna be absolutely championing and standing Sam a lot. But in so doing, I don't want people to miss the virtue of Frodo here. His task is of a completely different mind. If Sam was on his own, this would have failed. If Frodo was on his own, this would have failed. It takes both of them in order for this to work. And
just the two of us.
And Gollum, for that matter.
And Gollum. But the thing is, if it was just Sam, there would not be a Gollum.
Yeah. That's true.
So, assuming Gollum didn't, snuff him out at the first moment. But, my point is, if Sam had it in his power, Gollum would have been dead a long time ago. And it does require both of them, because Frodo is, in wanting to believe in Gollum, unwittingly walking into a buzzsaw. And Sam, in wanting to destroy Gollum, is unwittingly walking into a completely different buzzsaw. So it's like, I love that tension. Again, it's you have a dichotomy within Gollum and a dichotomy around Gollum. And I just love that that's present from Two Towers all the way to Return of the King, where we meet the end of that arc. But yeah, fantastic stuff. And we end on another moment that I think was extremely memorable for me in the theaters. I fell in love with the Balrog as a CGI creature, but another great Lord of the Rings creature that I adore is the Mumakil, the Oliphant, if you will. What a cool creature. It's an elephant, but bigger and more tusks. There's not much to it, but it's an elephant, but bigger with more tusks. Like, that's cool. That's freaking cool. I don't care who you are. That's awesome. And the scene where they're watching over the Mumakil, and also throughout the potato scene, you'll hear these weird birds.
The potato scene. I just love that. How I automatically know what that
is. You'll hear these weird bird calls, and Frodo's kind of picking up on them, and Gollum is slowly picking up on them. But those are not birds. Those are the Rangers the whole time.
Well, Gollum sneaks out as the scene goes on. And you're like, wait a second.
Yeah. You see him shuffle away as they linger a bit too long. I think it's around the time where Sam goes, "Mr. Frodo, look, Oliphants," and Gollum does give that again. Like, there's a lot of in this movie of people just saying what's happening and it not feeling intrusive, where Gollum's saying, he's trying to make his war the last war, and then we get the attack. The Rangers attack and totally terrify the elephants, which is just as bad for the Easterlings as it is for Gondor. So that's a neat scene. But I think the meat of it is what happens after. Nonetheless, though, do we want to talk about the Oliphants more and the scene overlooking the hill?
I was a kid obsessed with monster movies. I had so many Godzilla movies on VHS, and so like being this little kid in this theater seat seeing this giant elephant with more tusks, I thought I the Fellowship of the Ring is my life, and I'm ready to embrace whatever the Two Towers is as an addition to my life, and like to somehow just be like ready for the Fellowship of the Ring to have everything it was in that, you know, like the Watcher and the Cave Troll and the Balrog, and for this to happen, I was blown away. I'm like, this movie is everything I want. It threw another giant monster at me. How could I not be happy?
That's how I felt watching the Book of Boba Fett finale.
That's gonna date this recording so well.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I
you know, and
love
that's a really
And the Fellowship of the Ring 20th year retrospect.
yeah.
True.
But I love how Lord of the Rings, but just fantasy in general, good fantasy, even though it's fantasy, bridges the gap between fantasy and reality, right? It gives us reference points to real life, even with creature design. And that's what this is. So, you know, you have something otherworldly, and you have otherworldly things that show up in fantasy that are just of your nightmares. But then you have something like the Oliphant, which is immediately recognizable to us in real life, but it's altered to a fantastical level. And I think that that's a really cool thing about fantasy, and why I've always loved it is how good fantasy does that.
I agree. It's a good example of extrapolating on the mundane to make the fantastical. And I mean, like we've said many times, it's just a big elephant with more tusks, and yet that just makes it excellent.
On top of that, it's a war elephant.
Yes.
The war paint is so cool.
It is so cool.
And then later on, it uses its many tusks to do serious freaking damage.
And the chains they put between the tusks.
It's so painful.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I look at that and I'm going, like when Theoden's like, reform the line, charge. I'm like, no, go away. This is a bad idea. But yeah, I think obviously like we're enamored with it, but obviously the important part of the scene is the back end of it, where Frodo and Sam, seeing that this attack they've lingered too long, they need to get away, and then bam, there are rangers in the woods, and we come to know it's Faramir, but at the moment we have no idea who it is, and these men just throw Frodo and Sam down on their backs and start asking who they are and what they're doing here, and they make it clear that they're from Gondor and they're protecting their land. But it's another instance of, like you said, James, like, oh, it's men meeting hobbits. This should, good guys meeting good guys. This should be good, right? Yay. But no, it's immediate mistrust of one another and suspicion.
And this is when they try to kill Sméagol, right?
Not yet, because
It's coming.
Sméagol has snuck away at this point.
Yeah.
But the best part of this to me is there's like this dead Easterling laying there with arrows stuck through him, and Faramir gives this little monologue, where he says, Frodo says something about duty, and Faramir says, his sense of duty was no less than yours, I deem, and I wonder what led him on this long march from home.
What lies led him?
Yes. What lies drove him on this long march from home? Would he not rather have stayed there in peace? Or if he was really evil at heart? Like, that is a cool line that, again, like Lord of the Rings gets accused of being so black and white, but here we have the most gray possible interpretation of a human that, and this I think is also the first time we've seen human to human battle in Lord of the Rings. This is just men killing men. There's no order.
Mhm.
And Faramir is immediately letting us know this is a tragic thing. It's not happy. It's not good. There's a line that he has in the book that is used in music in Elvish for Boromir's death scene. And I think it encapsulates the scene very well, which is, he says, I love not the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend, which is like, oh my goodness. Again, great Tolkien writing. Just such a good line. But I think it encapsulates what we're seeing here, which is that this is a necessary evil. This is not something we want to be doing. It's a great.
It's in a series full of war and spectacular war scenes like Helm's Deep. It is fascinating how the series, even with all of its war and spectacular set pieces and cool battles, it doesn't glorify any of the war whatsoever. It glorifies courage and bravery and loyalty and those hard and fast values. But the war, as you said, Ryan, is, and as you alluded to, it's seen as a necessary evil, and it's not glorified that it's taking place and happening. And that just goes back to Tolkien growing up in the time that he did, and having the historical frame of reference for these stories in the first place. So the gravity that's there, where you're like, okay, yeah, this has to happen, this war has to be fought, but sure wish it didn't have to be. And war in and of itself is not
a good.
Tolkien was like just so insightful into deeply human things, and like despite being a fantasy, like you said, it's so much of it is influenced by his faith and by his life and his experience with the war and all of that. And you just feel these moments where he's speaking to reality, not in this is a timely response kind of way, but just a response to human reality outside of any particular time. And like, there's probably no other part in the series I want reality to listen to him more than like this scene, where this man just did battle with these people and killed these people. And he looks at him, and instead of like feeling pride at the tail end of victory, he says, like, I could have killed, because he calls him a boy, it's like, this man is, he's hardly even a man, he's so young. And he's like, I killed a guy who may not even have wanted to be here, and who is here for reasons that may not even be true. Like, he said
or threats, I think.
Yeah, like I don't know, his willingness to humanize
his enemy.
The enemy is just like, man, so often, I'm sure back then, during the war they experienced, during like experiences we have even in our modern day, like that idea of humanizing something that's different and recognizing a shared humanity, and like even the victorious should be weeping after battle. This is a tragedy that this ever had to happen.
Yep. And he closes out the first disc with a summation of his point: war will make corpses of us all.
That's where I miss, like, I have it on 4K now, and so it's just all the one disc, but that's where I kind of miss the 2-disc thing, because it's just like a mic drop of like that line and a hard cut to black, and everybody's just sitting on the couch like,
There is something magical about changing the disc for some
Yeah.
reason. It's
Well,
because
but
I have the extended edition Blu-ray trilogy, not 4K, which I love that box set so much.
me too.
But you know, you even with the Blu-rays, you change discs. And then I had the extended versions of at least a couple of them when they were just on DVD, and it was like, 57 DVDs or something like that. Please put in DVD 5. I'm exaggerating, but that's what it
DVD
that's what
3A.
that's what it felt like, yeah, a true intermission. Intermissions are underrated.
Love intermissions.
I agree. The only one I don't think is actually very strong is Return of the Kings, because it's kind of abrupt. But the Two Towers and Fellowship of the Rings intermissions are perfect.
It's Fellowships is always the one that makes me. It's the only transition that makes me laugh because of the line that said, as it fades and you put in the next thing. So where are we going? And it's just like, time to put in the next disc, but
that war will make corpses of us all thing it's a great way to end a disc. And if it wouldn't be a great way to end a movie, but it's a great way to end a scene and a great way to transition between halves. And also kind of encapsulates the mood of the film so far, because it has been kind of dark and dour and hopeless, and really allowing us to wallow in this self-pity is not the right word, but wallow in
despair.
Yeah, and it's warranted. Like you're not blaming anybody for feeling as bad as they do in this film, and all of that, I think, is an outward extension of what Gandalf said in Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had ever happened," which is just another way of saying, alas, that these evil days are mine, that these evil days should be mine, as, so do all who live to see such times. And we're seeing the so do all living to see such times. And we will get comparisons with how they will deal with it, how they will face it. I think in many ways, Lord of the Rings and the Two Towers in particular, and parts of Return of the King, are about what you do in the face of despair. And what a way to end a disc, and what a way to end our analysis here. So
yes,
obviously we're not going to give final thoughts and ratings until we've covered the entire film, but we will give some plugs here. I know that a couple of you guys have Letterboxd accounts, and maybe you would like to plug something else.
Hi, I'm Josh. So obviously go to first of all, go to Facebook and like the public page for Pop Americana, and also go find our discussion group, where a lot of great discussion occurs, not just on Lord of the Rings and other things like that, but just culture and art in general. It's a great group, growing pretty well. And then, of course, if you're into Star Wars, there is the Outer Rim on Facebook as well. We're over 5,000 members strong, and we really enjoy talking about Star Wars and enjoying Star Wars in a fairly civil environment compared to most other Star Wars discussion groups, which is a miracle in and of itself.
5,000 strong at least.
I was going to say the same thing.
I knew you were when I saw you smile.
It's like, I want to say it. I'm like, but let him do his plug. All right, James, you seem like you're having a good time.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a fellow admin over at both Pop Americana and the Outer Rim of Star Wars group as well. So I'm glad Josh got those plugs in there. So I will just plug my Letterboxd. I am there as JL Hamry, which is JLHAMRI. And so I've been a co-host of a podcast originally called Underrated. And then we transitioned to, and in that one, we talked about films that we thought were underrated and underappreciated and just sung their praises. And we transitioned to a podcast called Franchise Fatigue, where we pick a franchise and review each movie. And we did that for like 5 or 6 years, and it was incredibly rewarding. And I did had a lot of film growth during that. But my co-host and I both got increasingly busy lives, and I found it harder to coordinate time and harder to be able to dedicate all the time that went into that. So we've recently ended, but I plug the show nonetheless, just because we have a lot of great episodes still up there. So if you want to go and find us at Underrated Podcast as well as Franchise Fatigue.
Yeah, it's an enormous back catalog. There's a lot there.
Lots
And
of
everybody here has been a guest there. Right, Drew? We had you on, right?
No,
What the?
I know, right?
Yeah.
We got a reunion to make that happen now. What the final episode?
I do have to add one more thing. My letterbox is J Mesker 84, and right now the reason why I'm mentioning it, I actually don't write a lot of reviews, but I have found a niche lately
It's a great
in
movie.
which I'm a pretty mild-mannered guy, pretty forgiving guy about movies, but I tell you what, I have seen some of the most god-awful children's movies lately, and I really show no forgiveness or mercy on them whatsoever, and it's been fun. So sometimes it's just a couple lines, sometimes it's a bit more, but if you want to come see me, if you want to come know what I think about some of the more recent children's movies that have released on Disney Plus and other streaming platforms that I'm paying $10 a month to watch, please come to my letterbox.
Yeah, I look forward to checking out Josh going full Michael Vick on Paw Patrol, the movie.
So it's a good time when you see that Josh is watching the new Chipmunks movie.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for that.
But they really are well-written takedowns. I love it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, they're not even long. They're just like pithy. It's just like Clifford the Big Red Dud,
I love that.
for example. It was so bad, y'all. It was real bad. Drew, how about you?
Yeah. I have not seen Clifford the Big Red Dog, so no. But yeah,
It's real bad.
I also have a letterbox. It's Drewby Drew, DREWBY Drew, all one word.
How do you
And
spell
I've written a few. Oh, go ahead.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
It's on the screen anyway. So.
I've written a few reviews on there, and pretty soon here I'm going to be writing a few reviews somewhere else. So stay tuned to find out more soon.
Dun, dun, dun.
Awesome. And if you want to find my opinions on movies, that's what I'm doing here. So
There you go.
that's where you can find it. But yeah, like, subscribe, share, and be sure to join us next week for part 2 of The Two Towers, where we will take a very, very long time, I am sure, to talk about, well, mostly the Battle of Helm's Deep. It'll be fun.
And so it begins.
So